Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go on the record right now. My name is Joyce Connery, and I'm the chairman of the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board. I will preside over tonight's public hearing. I would like to introduce my colleagues on the board. To my left is Board Member Sean Sullivan. To my right is Board Member Daniel Santos. Next to Mr. Santos is Board Member Bruce Hamilton. Vice Chairman Jesse Roberson is unable to attend this evening's hearings due to a scheduling conflict, but we 5 constitute the board. Before we continue, I want to give you a small safety message. As you can tell, the exits are to both your right and to your left. And in the case of emergency, I would ask you to follow our staff out those exits. And if our staff could stand and identify themselves. So look around. Follow one of these fine folk out the door, should there be a need to do so. If you need the restrooms, they're out this door and to the left. And before we continue the proceedings, I would ask that we take a moment of silence in recognition of the tragic loss of life in recent terrorist attacks across the globe. Thank you. I'd also like to introduce our board's acting general counsel, Mr. James Biggins. He's seated to my far left. And to my far right is Acting Technical Director, Mr. Timothy Dwyer. Several members of the board staff closely involved with the oversight of the Department of Energy's defense nuclear facilities at Los Alamos National Laboratories are also here. The purpose of this hearing is to gather information on potential hazards to the public and workers posed by the storage and processing of transuranic waste at Los Alamos National Laboratory and DOE's plans to address them. As many in this room know, on February 14, 2014, a transuranic waste drum created here at LANL underwent an energetic reaction that caused a release of radioactive material at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, or WIPP. Subsequent investigations by the Department of Energy highlighted the hazard posed by this particular waste form, which was referred to as inappropriately remediated nitrate salt-bearing waste, or RNS for short. Over several hundred containers with this waste form were generated at LANL, and currently 60 of these containers are stored above ground at Area G. During this hearing, the board will receive testimony on the susceptibility of RNS waste to potential accidents that could result in the release of radioactive materials, the controls put in place to protect this waste from such potential accidents, and plans for treatment of the waste. The board is also interested in understanding potential hazards to the workforce and the public posed by management of all transuranic waste at Area G, especially during New Mexico wildfire season. A wildland fire can occur when conditions are hot, dry, windy, usually in the spring and early summer months. In addition to the RNS waste, the laboratory contractor has identified several other potential inadequacies with the Area G safety basis. The safety basis is important because it is the tool that DOE uses to document potential hazards and identify appropriate safety controls for improving the protection of the public and workers. Consequently, the board seeks to learn DOE's reviews and acceptance of risks associated with Area G, including the adequacy of safety controls currently in place for RNS waste and other waste stored at Area G. The Secretary of Energy directed the transition of legacy transuranic waste cleanup mission from the National Nuclear Security Administration to DOE's Office of Environmental Management in order to address the issues that were identified after the WIPP accident. The board wishes to hear from NNSA and DOE Environmental Management about how they support this transition and learn if any complications may arise from the transition. The board also seeks to understand what corrective action DOE EM, NNSA, and the laboratory contractor have undertaken to address the underlying causes of the 2014 accident and the progress they have made in implementing these actions. Finally, given that neither Area G nor WIPP is taking any additional waste at the moment, the board would like to understand the impacts on transuranic waste generating activities across the laboratory, most of which are key to improving safety at other LANL nuclear facilities, such as PF4. Therefore, this public hearing will focus on 3 main areas: potential hazards posed to the public and workers by waste stored at Area G, actions taken or planned to address inadequacies in the current safety basis of the various facilities that manage or store transuranic waste, and actions taken to improve transuranic waste management at Los Alamos in response to the challenges created by the backlog of materials due to the WIPP closure, as well as actions taken to address the root cause of the WIPP accident identified by the associated investigative findings. Tonight's order of business will include a statement from the board's technical staff and testimony from 2 panels. The first panel includes Ms. Madeline Creedon, the Principal Deputy Administrator of the National Nuclear Security Administration, Dr. Monica Regalbuto, the Assistant Secretary for Energy and for Environmental Management. The second panel will include Mr. Douglas Hinsey, Manager of DOE-EM, Los Alamos Field Office, Ms. Kimberly Davis-Liebeck, Manager, NNSA Los Alamos Field Office, Mr. Richard Kasich, Deputy Director of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Dr. David Funk, Deputy Associate Director for Environmental Management at LANL. This evening's hearing was publicly noticed in the Federal Register on March 4th, 2016. In order to ensure accurate and timely information, this hearing is being recorded through a verbatim transcript, a video recording, and live video streaming. The transcript, associated documents, public notice, and video recording will be available for viewing in our public reading room in Washington, D.C. In addition, an archived copy of the video recording will be available through our website for at least 60 days. As stated in the Federal Register notice, we welcome comments from interested members of the public present at the hearing. This part of the hearing will begin approximately 8 o'clock. A list of speakers who have contacted the board is posted at the entrance of this room. We have generally listed the speakers in the order in which they contacted us, or if possible, when they wish to speak. I will call the speakers in this order and ask that speakers state their name, affiliation at the beginning of the presentation. There's also a table at the entrance of this room with a sign-up sheet for members of the public who wish to make a presentation but did not have an opportunity to notify us ahead of time. They will follow those who have already registered with us in the order in which they sign up. Depending on the number of speakers wishing to make a presentation, we ask speakers to limit their original presentation to 3 minutes. I will give consideration to additional comments should time permit. Presentations should be limited to comments, technical information, or data concerning the subject of this public hearing. The board members may question anyone making a presentation to the extent deemed appropriate. The record of the hearing will remain open until April 22nd, 2016. Until that date, members of the public, including those observing today's hearing via video streaming, may submit a written statement to the board to be included in the record. Written statements and documents may also be submitted to the board staff at the table at the entrance to this room or to the address listed at the board's website at www.dnfsb.gov. The board reserves its right to further schedule and regulate the course of any hearing, to recess, reconvene, postpone, or adjourn any proceeding, and to otherwise exercise its authority under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954 as amended. I will now turn to my board members for opening remarks, should they have any. Mr. Sullivan?
No remarks.
Mr. Santos?
I have no remarks.
Mr. Hamilton?
No remarks, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. This concludes the board's opening remarks. At this time, we will continue with a statement from the board's senior technical staff. The board recognizes Mr. John Pascoe, who leads the board's Nuclear Materials Processing and Stabilization Group, accompanied by members of the DNFSB technical staff. He is briefly going to discuss the board staff's perspective on the LANL transuranic waste management, including associated hazards and controls, safety basis issues affecting transuranic waste, interim storage facilities, and contractor and federal corrective actions resulting from the WIPP radiological release. Mr. Pascoe, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I appreciate this opportunity to represent the technical staff tonight and to outline the current situation concerning Los Alamos National Laboratories transuranic waste management. The purpose of my statement tonight is to provide background information in order to assist the public in understanding today's proceedings. A handout listing acronyms and definition used in my remarks and then later in the proceeding that you'll likely to hear is available at the room entrance. The capability to safely manage transuranic waste is critical to the many operations at LANL. including closure activities at Area G and key risk reduction activities at the plutonium facility and the chemistry and metallurgy research facility. Transuranic waste operations at the lab involve storing, processing, packaging, and shipping facilities to deal with both legacy and newly generated transuranic waste, with legacy waste being defined as waste generated prior to 1999. The Department of Energy, Office of Environmental Management, the National Nuclear Security Administration, and a laboratory contractor must safely manage both of these waste streams in order to achieve the important mission of the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Area G provides LANL's current capability for storage and certification of transuranic waste prior to off-site shipment. Today's above-ground waste inventory includes about 3,500 containers, including 2,000 that require remediation prior to shipment. Area G is currently not accepting additional true waste due to concerns with the accuracy of its safety basis. The Waste Characterization, Reduction, and Repackaging Facility, or WICR, is used to remediate and repackage transuranic waste. It's the only such facility at the laboratory. The WICR facility is currently not operational, awaiting physical upgrades to the structure and safety basis modifications. The radioassay and non-destructive testing facility, which is referred to as a ranch shipping facility, is used to prepare and load waste payloads for off-site shipment. RANT is also currently not operational. Newly generated true waste continues to be produced, primarily in support of risk reduction activities. Due to the shutdown of WIPP, transuranic waste is accumulating at laboratory nuclear facilities. At the plutonium facility, personnel have identified interim storage locations for this waste. However, as waste continues to accumulate, risk reduction efforts may be impacted. The transuranic waste facility, which is scheduled to become operational in 2017, will provide additional location for waste storage. In addition to the issues resulting from the inability of WIPP to accept transuranic waste, Area G faces other near-term challenges. It is a storage location for 60 inappropriately remediated nitrate salt-bearing containers, or RNS waste, with contents similar to the drum that underwent an exothermic event at WIPP. Challenges exist with both storage and treatment of these containers. To gain a better understanding of the hazards associated with RNS waste, let's review its history. At the plutonium facility, nitric acid was utilized to recover and purify plutonium to support the U.S. nuclear mission. In the 1980s, post-process acidic solutions were concentrated via evaporation to form nitrate salt residue. To meet WIPP waste acceptance criteria, free liquids were neutralized and mixed with a supposedly inert absorbent material to reduce the oxidizing potential of these salts. In March 2012, processing of nitrate salts was put on hold due to LANL contractor work concerns about the compatibility of the organic polymer absorbent WasteLock 770 with the nitrate salt mixture. The LANL difficult waste team identified this organic polymer as an inappropriate absorbent and recommended an inorganic absorbent material be used instead. This material has been commonly referred to as kitty litter. My use of organic, inorganic refers to the chemical definition, the presence or absence of hydrocarbons. In October 2012, the contractor incorrectly transitioned to an organic kitty litter absorbent material. Use of this organic absorbent, which is a fuel, during remediation of nitrate salts, which are oxidizers, resulted in a fuel oxidizer mixture within the waste containers. In December 2013, drum number 68660 was generated at the laboratory using the inappropriate organic absorbent and subsequently shipped and placed in Panel 7, Room 7 of the WIPP underground facility in January 2014. On February 14, 2014, a radiological release event occurred at WIPP contaminating portions of the underground mine and causing low-level internal exposure of more than 20 workers. Subsequent investigations revealed that drum 68660 was the origin of the release. In response to this discovery in May 2014, LANL implemented compensatory measures to address the potential for a similar event with the 60 drums of RNS waste stored at Area G. The LANL contractor overpacked these drums in robust metal containers and placed them inside an Area G sheet metal structure containing fire suppression, temperature control, high-efficiency air particulate filtration, and radiological continuous air monitoring systems. During this time, the Accident Investigation Board, Technical Assessment Team, and LANL Chemistry Research teams further investigated the cause and mechanism for the radiological release. From these investigations, it was learned that the release event likely resulted from a self-initiated exothermic reaction involving the nitrate salt oxidizer and the organic absorbent fuel. A series of chemical reactions led to temperature buildup and pressurization within drum 68660, which resulted in eventual failure and release of the drum contents. In its April 2015 report, the DOE Accident Investigation Board identified that the amount of radiological material released from this event was significantly greater by 2 orders of magnitude than from events analyzed by DOE standards. As a result, exothermic reactions for RNS waste containers in Area G have the potential for serious radiological release. As residents of the state well know, wildland fires are a significant hazard in northern Mexico, with the 2000 Sierra Grande fire and the 2011 Las Conchas fire providing stark examples of the potential threat to the Los Alamos area. External insults to RNS waste, such as the heating due to a wildland fire, have the potential to initiate an energetic exothermic reaction. As to the Area G safety basis, there are currently four significant potential inadequacies of the safety analysis, or PISA, associated with the Area G facility. The PISA process is how the Department of Energy and its contractors are supposed to handle new information that might impact the safe operation of a nuclear facility. This process requires contractors to place the affected facility in a safe condition, expeditiously notify the department of the situation, determine if there are any unreviewed safety questions, and complete an evaluation of the safety of the situation, or ESS. The ESS is a formal written mechanism that describes the condition associated with the PISAs. It includes the operational controls required to maintain the facility in a safe condition and the safety analysis supporting these controls. These four significant Area G PISAs declared in 2015 include inaccuracies in the amount and composition of the material at risk, the amount of material likely to be released from certain containers during a fire, an impact of a wildland fire, and the impact of a wildland fire as I just described a moment ago. All four of these PISAs influence the potential quantity of radioactive material released by a given accident at Area G, and therefore the potential consequence to the public and workers for an accident scenario. Given the important role of the ESS in formally establishing the safe condition of a facility, DOE guidance states that an ESS should be developed as soon as practicable and should not take more than a month. Finally, the DOE Accident Investigation Report Phase 2 report on the WIPP radiological release event identified a series of judgments of need, or JONs, for the LANL contractor, the NNSA EM field offices, and DOE headquarters. JONs identify the root and contributing causes that, if corrected, could have prevented the accident. Examples of these JONs include: the LANL contractor needs to develop and implement a fully integrated contractor assurance system that provides DOE and the contractor confidence that work is performed compliantly, risks are identified, and control systems are effective. The NSA Field Office oversight of characterization and certification of transuranic waste needs to be improved. 3, DOE headquarters needs to develop and implement a comprehensive oversight program for the National True Program activities, which include generator site true waste programs, true waste certification program, and the disposal system program. Corrective actions have been established by all entities in response to these jobs. The board staff has been closely following these Area G issues. In addition to our 2 resident site representatives, over half a dozen of our headquarters staff have actively reviewed the analyses focused on determining the cause of the WIPP event, the safe storage and remediation plans for the RNS waste, the implications of a wildland fire on all waste at Area G, as well as the corrective actions plan for the judgments of need. The staff will continue to focus on these areas that impact public and worker safety until the associated risks are adequately prevented or mitigated. This, Madam Chair, completes my statement.
Thank you, Mr. Pasco, for that helpful background. At this time, I'd like to continue the hearing by inviting the first panel of witnesses to the witness table. The first panel includes, as mentioned earlier, Ms. Madeline Creedon, Principal Deputy Administrator for the National Nuclear Security Administration, and Dr. Monica Reglabuto, DOE Assistant Secretary for Environmental Management. We've set aside time for opening statements by panel members, and the board will be provided with their written statements for public record as well. After the opening statements are made, the board will ask questions of the panel members. The other panelists may seek recognition by the chair to supplement an answer as necessary. If either panelist would like to take a question for the record, the response will be entered into the record for this hearing at a later time. Thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening. And I'd like to open with the Honorable Madeline Creedon's opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening to discuss the safety of transuranic waste operations at Los Alamos National Laboratory. I have prepared a written statement that I will submit for the record, but being mindful of the time, I will briefly summarize that longer statement. Today, I will address actions that the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, has already taken or is planning to take that are related to the radiological release event at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant in February of 2014. The release at WIPP resulted from an unexpected exothermic reaction and pressure buildup in a single 55-gallon drum of transuranic waste. This drum failed and released radioactivity inside WIPP. The drum was one of a number of nitrate salt drums that were being remediated at Los Alamos. A detailed accident board investigation was chartered to determine the root cause of the incident. This investigation revealed that during the course of the remediation, an improper absorbent material was used in the drums to absorb liquids. Subsequent to the event, Los Alamos personnel identified another 60 waste drums, which are currently stored at Los Alamos and which contain similar waste remediated using the improper absorbent. The question then is, what about the 60 drums at Los Alamos? Is it possible that they would suffer the same fate as the drum at WIPP? Since February of 2014, Los Alamos and the Department of Energy have looked at this question extensively. Experimental evidence has now demonstrated that the risk of a similar exothermic reaction is minimized by controlling the pressure and the temperature within each drum. As a result of this finding, and in consultation with the state of New Mexico, DOE and NNSA developed and executed an isolation plan to ensure the safety of these 60 waste drums. This plan involved placing the drums into individual, large, robust metal containers and storing the containers in a climate-cold structure, 1 at Los Alamos. Each of the containers has a filtered ventilation system, and a new supplemental cooling system has also been installed at the structure. The containers are closely monitored every day. Because we do worry about a fire and heat buildup in the structure, NNSA, in partnership with the DOE Office of Environmental Management, has made significant reductions in the available vegetative fuel sources surrounding the structure. In other words, the brush surrounding the general area has been removed. We have also taken other measures, such as developing fire breaks, to drastically lower the probability that a wildland fire could endanger these drums. With air conditioning in the structure and the fire protection now in place, we are moving to provide additional pressure relief mechanisms for the key individual drums. With these new mechanisms in place, a reaction similar to what happened at WIPP will be prevented by two independent means. One, controlling the temperature, and two, controlling the pressure of the drums. These measures will remain in place until the drums can be fully remediated. In closing, I would like to reiterate NNSA's commitment to working closely with EM and with the state of New Mexico to ensure that all appropriate efforts are made to reduce the risk posed by the 60 transuranic drums stored at Los Alamos. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to Dr. Regobuto now for her opening statement.
Chairman Connery, distinguished members of the board, good evening, and thank you for convening this important hearing to discuss transuranic waste management at Los Alamos National Laboratory. The ongoing management of the transuranic waste inventory at Los Alamos Laboratory is the responsibility of two elements within the Department of Energy, the Office of Environmental Management and the National Security Administration. The Office of Environmental Management has responsibility for the management and disposition of legacy waste. This is waste generated prior to fiscal year 1999, while the National Security Administration has the responsibility for newly generated waste. With the ongoing challenges presented by the shutdown of the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, commonly referred to as WIPP, it has necessitated that both program elements work closely in order to ensure transuranic waste at Los Alamos National Laboratory is maintained in a safe and compliant manner. I personally communicate regularly with the site and my colleagues within the National Security Administration to ensure that we're both working in the same end. We share a commitment to ensure the ongoing storage, processing, and eventual disposition of this waste are executed in ways which protect the public, workers, and the environment. Since the radiological event at WIPP on February 14 of 2014, the Office of Environmental Management has spent considerable effort to ensure it understands what caused the release and what should be done to prevent a future recurrence. The event was investigated by the Department of Energy-led Accident Investigation Board. This board identified on May 15, 2014, that a drum number 68660 originated from Los Alamos National Laboratory and was compromised in Room 7, Panel 7 of the WIPP underground. It was later determined by the Accident Investigation Board that this was the only drum that was compromised in WIPP, and that a combination of incompatible materials had been added to the drums, resulting in an exothermic reaction in the drum. The Accident Investigation Board culminated with an exhaustive review of the event and published its findings on April 15 of 2015. This report was very self-critical and identified 40 areas or judgments of needs that require improvement in order to strengthen the department's transuranic waste program. The accident at WIPP caused DOE to fully evaluate its transuranic waste management program, identify weaknesses, and begin to make changes to strengthen the program at LANL and across the other sites across the DOE complex. DOE continues this process as well as improving its oversight of compliance within the program to prevent similar incidents. Since the WIPP incident, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, along with other elements of the department, including the Office of Environmental Management, our Carlsbad Field Office, our Los Alamos Field Office, our contractor at WIPP, Nuclear Waste Partnership, and the National Security Administration field offices, have corrective action plans in place to strengthen each respective organization's responsibilities for transuranic waste management. In addition, on September 25th of 2014, the Secretary of Energy issued direction to the National Security Administration and the Office of Environmental Management to work collaboratively to develop a plan for the transition of legacy cleanup work at Los Alamos to an EM-managed contract. Since that time, actually 1 year ago to this date, EM opened up the Los Alamos field office. Mr. Douglas Hinsey, manager of this office, will speak to you as part of the second panel. As part of this change, the contract for legacy cleanup work was transitioned on October 1st of 2015 to the Office of Environmental Management, and work is being conducted on this contract, including the ongoing management of the waste in Technical Area 54. This contract, referred to as the Los Alamos Bridge Contract, is with the Los Alamos National Security, or LANS. Significant management attention and resources have been focused to ensure the cleanup of the Los Alamos progresses and the waste continues to be stored safely. To facilitate this transition, the two Los Alamos field offices have established a memorandum of understanding where roles and responsibilities are clearly outlined between the two field offices. Technical Area 54 at Los Alamos National Laboratory currently stores about 3,500 transuranic waste containers above ground. These containers are stored within metal containers on the fabric domes. The facility is categorized as a hazard Category 2 nuclear facility according to the Department of Energy orders. Given the potential hazards inherent to the radiological waste stored, an evaluation of these hazards is performed. This evaluation and the controls generated by this analysis is part of the authorization basis for the facility. In addition, as a result of the self-scrutiny we had applied since the radiological release of WIPP, we have discovered additional new information, which require us to take further protective measures regarding the waste that is stored in Technical Area 54. The current risk profile at Area G, located within Technical Area 54, is dominated by 60 drums derived from the waste stream referred to as nitrous salts. The waste stream was generated as a result of the plutonium purification process conducted 3 decades ago in Los Alamos, and as it was reviewed by the staff member who gave you the background. These nitrous salts were incorrectly remediated at Los Alamos when an organic absorbent was added to these drums, resulting in 2 incompatible materials being brought together, an oxidizing salt and a wheat-based organic absorbent. Given the additional hazards that were created during the remediation process, this waste stream now presents additional unique hazards that were not fully evaluated in the past. As a result, we have taken near-term actions to protect this waste, as described by Ms. Credence. In order to fully understand what occurred within the Los Alamos drop at WIPP, scientific experiments have been conducted to help us understand the reaction mechanisms. This knowledge was used to inform us how best to safely store the waste and ultimately how to treat and remediate the nitrous salt waste. This research demonstrated that temperature and pressure are critical important parameters that influence the chemical reactions that are capable of occurring within this drum. Therefore, the drums are stored in a climate-controlled environment to control the temperature parameter, and each drum is equipped with a filtered drum vent. In order to ensure that these drums do not become pressurized, we are beginning a process to add a supplemental vent to each of the remediated salt drums at Los Alamos to support their safe storage. Ultimately, the resolution of this risk possessed by the nitrous salt waste at Los Alamos is the treatment of the waste. Treatment is being pursued in a focused and methodical manner. Treatment options are currently being evaluated. The treatment of the remediated drums must be executed in a way that ensures the safety of the workers conducting the process, as well as the safety of the disposal facility at WIPP. I ask that the selection process be extensively peer-reviewed by national laboratories, universities, and other DOE sites to ensure that the selected option is sound and will be effective when implemented. I await recommendation from the peer review process on the path forward to this position. In summary, the Office of Environmental Management is committed to the ongoing safe storage and treatment of all legacy transuranic waste at Los Alamos and working closely with the National Security Administration to manage and reduce risk at Los Alamos. The department has taken effective steps and will take further steps to reduce the risk associated with the storage of transuranic waste in Area TA 54. These measures are providing effective protection to the public, the workers, and the environment. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. I look forward to answering your questions.
I'd like to thank each of you for your testimony this evening. I'm encouraged by the forward-looking activities that you mentioned in your opening statements. So we're going to move to the question and answer portion of this hearing, and I'm going to actually start, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for additional lines of inquiry. But where I'd like to start, ladies, is with the discussion of the transition to having the Environmental Management Office operating at Los Alamos and how NNSA and EM are going to work together in terms of the division of labor. In specific, and I'll address this first question to Dr. Regabuto, and Ms. Green, you can answer as well, but we're trying to understand how the division of labor is going to work. Our understanding is that the safety basis is still owned by NNSA, and that they will be preparing, making preparations for work that goes forward, but that EM will have obviously input into that process as well as have to concur in that process. And just to quote your testimony earlier, Dr. Regabuto, you said that the challenges that we had at WIPP were due to two incompatible materials being brought together, and we hope that this is not the case with NNSA and EM, but that you are two compatible materials that when brought together will make things better, but we just want to hear from you your views on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We are not incompatible materials, for the record. We're actually one floor away, so it's really, we can knock on the door and the floor and say hello. The challenge comes into standing a new facility, a new field office for EM at Los Alamos. So we had a very small staff, and we increase our staff capabilities to about 20 FTEs. And to really stand up the right organization, we need 40 active FTEs. With that, one of the most critical positions that need to be filled up are any positions related to safety, cognizant engineers, fire protection, and the like. Because of this, we are doing this in a two-phase approach. So the first phase, which is the first 2 years, the DSA is maintained by NNSA that has all the infrastructure required to support the documented safety analysis. In the meantime, because we have a bridge contract and we plan to transition around fiscal year 18, we will be developing a new documented safety analysis, given the fact that we are currently working under a bio, not a DSA. And when we do that, we will transition not only the DSA, but the contract, and we will have our fully staffed operations, which our target is 40 FTEs. We have already hired a group of people that are going to come and help us write the DSA, but it will not be available until FY18. So we will have to work under the current bio until the document is approved. Other logistics, NNSA is the landlord, right? And as the landlord, they own all the facilities. We do not own the facilities. We own the operations that we conduct in those facilities, but the safeguarding of those facilities in terms of protective mechanisms and the like remain a responsibility of NNSA. And to give you an example, this is not the first time that we share space with other landlords, specifically with NNSA, Savannah River site, is a joint site also with NNSA. We have Office of Science at Oak Ridge, Office of Nuclear Energy at Idaho. So we are familiar to these mechanisms. It just takes time to stand up a new office so we can do it safely. I hope I answered your question.
I have nothing to add to that. I think that's very accurate. One of the things that's most important is that this transition be very smooth, and that it's very seamless. And so, having it occur over the course of the next 2 years, simultaneously with the transition to whatever contracting structure EM decides to implement in 2018, is the right timescale. And so far, it's been very close. And as Dr. Reglabudo said, we have a lot of experience in working together at a variety of different sites.
And in the event where there's a difference of opinion as to, for instance, the facility to use to remediate the 60 RNS drums or anything of that nature, how would you decide the precedence of who makes that decision and how it gets made?
Well, as you might expect, this whole series of events has extraordinarily high-level attention in DOE, and so almost everything associated with this whole issue has a tendency to resolve itself at the very highest levels of the department. So I think one of the things that's important here is that we make sure that the lab, our two respective field offices have the technical capability to really understand all of the technical implications of the actions that we're taking now to ensure the safety of the drums and the actions that will be taken later to remediate the drums, and then can make the recommendations jointly up the chain. If not, we have a lot of folks at headquarters who were more than willing and have been willing and have jumped in with this for a very long period of time, so I'm not really worried about it.
Let me just add that, the collaboration really, we don't have to wait until there is a difference of opinions. Difference of opinions are welcome, and that is part of the peer review process. We have an integrated project team, an IPT, that is composed by a number of different entities, including entities outside of NNSA and EM, that have good backgrounds that bring to the table. We do it in a collaborative manner, and, everybody's in the same room at the same time, I think including your staff members. So, difference of opinions are actually welcome because we have to view things in different ways. And sometimes, we know what we have done, but others can come in with very good ideas. So it's a collaborative process, and it has so far resulted in a pretty good collaboration among the two organizations. And like everything else, everything happens at the field level. So the field really is what, transfers that knowledge and recommendations and moves up. So we are very happy about the way the two elements in the field have been working together.
And so then just my final question along these lines has to do with prioritization. It is an NNSA site. You have priorities with regards to the mission itself. And so I just want to have an understanding from your perspective, Ms. Creedon, as to where this issue falls in the prioritization.
For a large number of reasons, this is a very high priority. Obviously, Los Alamos is a very complex, multidisciplinary site that has a lot of tasks, all of which are very important to national security. This one in particular is very high priority. Among other things, it's extraordinarily important that we get WIPP back open. So we share in EM's goal of getting WIPP back open. It's also important that we get Area G functioning again, that we get these barrels remediated and shipped back to WIPP when it opens. And the long-term and even the broader implications, particularly with respect to WIPP for NNSA writ large, is with respect to carrying out our overall mission, having WIPP reopened is extraordinarily important, not only for the Los Alamos mission, but for all of the NNSA missions and all of the NNSA sites across the country, as well as many of EM's other sites. I mean, all of us rely on WIPP to make sure that all of our missions keep flowing and keep getting accomplished. So it's extraordinarily important that we work together and we resolve all of these issues as safely and as quickly as possible, because it does have a long-term issue. I would also say that specifically from Los Alamos and from the NNSA mission at Los Alamos, it also is extraordinarily important because it has an impact on how Los Alamos handles the newly generated waste, which then also has a very direct impact on mission. So it has many, many tentacles in terms of its importance.
Thank you. I'd like to turn the questioning over to Mr. Hamilton for the next set of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dr. Regal-Buto, recognizing that y'all are collaborative, you have a collaborative relationship, I'm going to ask these questions of Ms. Creedon, but feel free to back her up. Ms. Creedon, in your opening remarks and also in your written testimony, you discussed how the Department of Energy and NNSA and contractor personnel have completed extensive research, testing, and evaluation of the remediated nitrate salt waste following the WIPP release event. Can you tell me about the hazards from the other transuranic waste at Area G? I think the number was 3,518. Can you tell me about the hazards there?
What I would like to do on this particular one is actually request some assistance here, but also possibly defer some of that question to the technical panel, which is in fact the panel that has most of the on-the-ground knowledge about this. And it also is a little bit how our various responsibilities are organized. So the Office of Environmental Management has had for a very long time responsibility for the legacy waste. NNSA has responsibility for the newly generated waste. The big change that happened about a year ago was the way the contract structure is going to be sorted out, so that as EM manages the legacy waste, they are going to now do it under their own contract as opposed to carrying out their work under the contract that we have at Los Alamos with lands. So because I think your question is primarily associated with the legacy waste, I would want to defer some of that to Monica. But from our perspective, as was indicated, these 60 drums are the highest priority, and they are responsible for the highest fraction of the concern.
So related to the Area G drums, obviously after the incident at WIPP, not only did we do a very comprehensive sweep through Area G, we did a comprehensive sweep throughout the whole complex, because the first question that comes to our mind is, what other drums have the same characteristics as the drum that was breached at WIPP? As given all the experimental data, it was determined, that there were very specific oxidizing characteristics. And so we narrow our sweep in through those particular ones. In Area G, there's about 3,500 transuranic containers. We call them containers because some are not drums. And 500 of those are what we call newly generated, and they do not possess those characteristics. And there's another 3,000 that we call legacy material, and those also do not have those characteristics. The only drums that we have that have the same characteristics, which is an oxidizing element and an organic component, are the 60 RNS drums that we're currently focusing our work on. So not only is Area G a concern of ours, is also the rest of the complex a concern of ours, because we package waste at different facilities. And so that was done very quickly and promptly as soon as we developed new information. Now keep in mind that to get more information, it wasn't an instantaneous process. We had phase 1 of the AIB report, phase 2 and part 1 and 2, whatever. So as new knowledge came in out of the Accident Investigation Board, new data calls kept on going back and forth to the sites. So for Area G specifically, the concern is those 60 RNS drums.
If those 60 drums weren't there, would we have seen the things you've done recently put in place for the fire breaks and the fire protection and all of the things you described earlier? Recognizing the venting was just for the 60, or the proposed venting is just for the 60 drums, but would all of those other things have been necessary had it not been for those 60 improperly remediated drums?
So there were a couple of things that we learned from the WIPP accident, and that was when the drum breached, the material that was exposed had 2 or 3 orders of magnitude higher than what was considered in the safety analysis for TA-54. So, or Area G, which really is the storage facility, which is what we focus on. There were other things that as we dig through and as more knowledge was acquired, for example, the material at risk. There were some historical data that did not account for the presence of americium-241. So there were a number of other things that we learned after the incident, including how quickly did the drum fail given a pool of fire. Given all of that, regardless of if we had an oxidizing agent in combination with an organic, we still found other things that are applicable to Area G. And that's why the DSA right now is now out of compliance, if we want to call it that way. And that is why the fire protection mechanism, even if those 60 drums weren't there, we will still have to do it. Because the assumptions that were done were not, when the accident happened at WIPP, we came in with new knowledge and concluded that the assumptions that had been done in Area G for an event of a fire were no longer appropriate.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I've been studying this issue for several months, and I think that's the first time I've heard that explanation, that eloquent explanation, so thank you. Ms. Creedon, I want to talk about emergency preparedness. What level of confidence do you have that the contractor is prepared and will respond appropriately to an emergency involving the transuranic waste at Area G?
So I'd like to start maybe with a little bit of background. Over the course of the last year and a half, the department writ large has been extraordinarily focused. In fact, it's a renewed focus on emergency management, the capabilities of the department to respond and manage any sort of an emergency. We've referred to this as the all-hazard emergency approach. So with the focus and attention that's happened and has taken place at the headquarters level, that has also filtered out across all of, and I'll speak for the NNSA sites at the moment, but I know across all the sites, just with a lot more focus and attention on emergency management. This was going on at about the same time that the board also had made a recommendation to the department on emergency management, again writ large. And as we look at the emergency management activities here at Los Alamos, our M&O partner as well as the field office have also been very focused on this. It's been part of all of the restart efforts that have been going on here, particularly at PF4, and it continues to be a very high priority. I think this particular lab has had some real world experience in responding to the 2 fires that had occurred here. No other site has gone through quite the events that this site has had to cope with. So it is extraordinarily important. Now, I know that there are some issues, and we have, in this very context, we have made it very clear, we at NSA have made it very clear through our acting chief safety officer, that we expect all of these new precautions that we have put in place, these measures that we have put in place, that these need to be exercised at a very local level. And we have made it very clear, all of us understand that these have to be drilled and exercised at the local level. So we try to manage it from the very local area to a site and to the department as a whole.
Are you confident that the employees at Area G, that local element, is that they know how to respond? Have they actually practiced emergency exercises and drills?
They have, and I do have confidence that they know how to respond. They had one just recently.
No more questions on this topic, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Mr. Sullivan to ask a few questions, if you would.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to both of you for being here. I extend my personal thanks. I know you're busy people with lots to do around the country at different places, so I appreciate your personal attention to this significant issue. So I'd like to start by asking Dr. Reglabudo a little bit more about some of the specifics that I think we've heard. We've heard already that these 60 drums were placed in containers. The containers are in an environmentally controlled structure. There are fire breaks, and there's been some brush clearing, and there's been discussion of venting of these containers. Can you tell me a little bit more about the venting? When will that happen? Do we have a specific procedure that should be done in the next few weeks, months? Can you elaborate a little bit, please?
Yes, the current focus is, and first let me tell you the bigger picture. Right now is we're focusing on the venting as an intermediate step, but the ultimate goal is to remediate the solid waste. So venting happens first, while in the same time, in parallel, we're developing the process flow sheet, which determines what chemistry we're going to use and what are the steps that are going to do to remediate, ultimately, take care of the problem, if you want to call it. And then we will have to determine what will be the treatment, and then where are we going to do that treatment, and then ultimately execute the treatment and further disposal at WIPP. So right now, the intermediate step is we're going to do the pressure relief portion of the drums. We're doing that in two phases. The first phase is these containers or drums are normally packaged into two types of bigger outer pack, right? So it is the standardized waste boxes, and some are pack over packs. So, bigger 75-gallon drums. So the first ones that we're going to tackle is the standardized waste boxes. The standardized waste boxes are, they were really sealed, and they're difficult to be opened. So imagine you have usually 4 drums inside a standard waste box. So the first step, which is getting the waste box open. So that is part of phase 1. And there is a procedure recently got approved, and they were in the process of executing that activity. So that will allow us to take the drums out. It's not the procedure yet to install the larger vent into the drums. That procedure is currently ongoing peer review process, and is not ready to be signed and authorized by all the parties, which is ultimately the DSA, as we mentioned, is NNSA, but they're doing this in collaboration with EM, so there is an EM concurrent step as part of this. So what you will see happening in the next few days is the removal of the standardized waste boxes lids. At the same time, there is a group of people working on the process of how are we going to remove the lid, and currently the vision is, and it may change if they determine that this is not a good idea, a safe idea, is we're not going to drill on the drums themselves. We're just going to swap lids. So we're going to have a lids prepare. I know that some of the rupture discs have been procured. Some of the HEPA filters have been procured, and I think available for the public if I recall, there are some fact sheets for people to pick up, so they see exactly how the lids are going to be swapped. But that requires significantly more thought process because now we have workers opening a drum that we have not the most confidence, right? So we have to protect the workers and make sure that if by any reason there is any release, the permacon or whatever facility we're going to use to do this has the right HEPA ventilation and area to protect, the neighbors and the workers outside of this facility and then the community at large. So that's where we are.
Okay. Just to clarify, your lack of confidence was in the drums, not the workers.
Correct.
Okay. I thought that's what you meant.
Yes.
I'm sure there's workers listening, and I'm sure they just wanted to make sure that.
But my job is to protect the workers. So.
I understand. So I think we're talking weeks on the venting. I'm not trying to hold you to a date. I was just trying to get a sense for order of magnitude in terms of time. I had the occasion about 2 weeks ago to go out and walk around this permacon site where these drums are and look at the cooling system. And so we have a cooling system which is going to control the environment, and that should help in a fire, but it didn't seem to me like there was any real protection for the cooling system itself. I mean, it's just sort of sitting outside. It's got a single power supply. There's a blower that's just, it's a regular extension cord. I guess it just wasn't apparent to me that if you actually had a large wildland fire, that the cooling system itself would survive. Do you know if anybody's looked at that?
So I appreciate you bringing this up, and I will defer this question to the next panel. But not only is the cooling system something that we should be concerned during, as you clearly pointed out, during a fire, we also need to be concerned about the integrity of the structure of the permacon. And I know that the models are still being peer reviewed by Sandia that were executed. And I will let the site comment on that, but they have looked at other ways to protect the perimeter of the building itself. So I will just defer to the next panel.
Okay. And then have you considered other things like fire blankets or something that could be put over these containers, and maybe that would protect them if the cooling system didn't?
Yeah, so fire blankets are definitely part of the upgrades that are being done in addition to, cutting the brush to, I think they finished today. It's about 75 feet around the perimeter of the area G, and then the brushes should be shorter than 5 inches. So that pretty much, if you look at the before and after pictures, it's obviously the vegetation is gone. In addition, there is, the fire blankets, and it's also the fire break that was done. And there's also new procedures for the fire department in how to apply the foam. So there's a number of other things that have been looked at. Ultimately, one has to think that everything fails, right? And that is why we figure if we relieve the pressure from the drums, if we allow it to be relieved, then we will stop the runaway reaction. So that is why we preventively are going up to, making sure that we don't allow those containers to overpressurize, even in the worst case scenario, because we have to plan for worst case scenario. But I'm hoping that the next panel will address a little bit more of the details. But yes, the answer to your question is yes, we are doing some of that. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so my last question, I heard...
If it's, I just
Go
want
ahead.
one
Yes.
more thing on that one is another piece of this would be if there were a situation where a fire looked as if it were possible or imminent, there would also be a plan to pre-position the fire response equipment at the site. So it isn't just, it's multiple layers of defense in depth that have been looked at by both organizations.
Well, thank you. And so again, I'm not sure which one I should be asking the question to, so I'll just ask the question and whoever wants to answer it. But I heard earlier Mr. Hamilton was asking Dr. Reglabudo about the other waste, not the 60 drums. And I understood you said you learned a lot about that, including a much higher fraction of material might come out if there was a problem. So I've also heard and I heard you explain that there's an analysis that the DSA, the Documented Safety Analysis, and NNSA is looking at that. So maybe Ms. Creedon wants to answer, or maybe you, but I haven't heard anybody say they've done anything with any of that waste. So I'm just trying to confirm, we've talked a lot about, other than we've cut down the wildland, the brush, but any of the specifics, venting, moving anything, greater separation, cooling, anything for any of that other waste? Is there any other specific measures that are currently planned for that other waste?
So the more details, the next panel will tell you a little bit more, but I can tell you a couple of things. One is, once we realized that material risk was significantly higher, we stopped bringing any new materials to Area G. So that was step number one, is no new additional inventory has come into the area, and NNSA has put in a different plan for the newly generated waste as of the day that this was known. So they have storage areas at the PFP, and then the CMR waste is going to TA55. So that is one thing that immediately happened. Second, the spacing of the containers did change. And if you had the opportunity to tour, it looks like wasted space, right? That you walk and there's like a pocket of little drums in there, and then, pretty far away is another pocket and the like. That was another mitigation strategy. Ultimately, some of that waste is, ready to go, but there is no place to go right now. So we have to do some intermediate strategies until we're able to get our facility functioning again. And then again, this is not only a concern for Los Alamos, it's a concern for us across the complex, because a lot of these facilities have to be viewed now from the point of view that, how much material can we keep, and to what point do we stop packaging because we don't have a path. So it's all tangled up together, but yes, we do worry about every drum, not only the 60 drums. Every container is a concern for us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Reglabudo, you referred to one of your handouts from the Department of Energy. Do you happen to have an exhibit number listed on that one for the record?
I can give you a title. I apologize, they didn't give me a number in here, but it's providing additional pressure relief to the remediated nitrous salt drums. It's a publication from Los Alamos National Laboratory, and is with the Office of Environmental Management and NNSA. So I can certainly pass it along.
Yeah, I believe we have those available for the public, and we had an exhibit scheme, but I don't seem to have it with me. So
I apologize.
No worries.
Mine doesn't have a number. Maybe somebody from the board may know, from the staff members.
Madam Chair, we'll mark that as a DOE Exhibit 1.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you for that. Sorry for that little public service announcement. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Santos to ask his line of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to both Ms. Creedon and Dr. Reglabudo for being here today. I'll start with Dr. Reglabudo, but you're both welcome to answer. Given the potential consequences associated with these 60 RNS drums, can you help explain for the public what other options were considered for reducing the associated hazards? For example, did you consider shipping these drums to less populated areas, whether it's in the state or other parts of the country, or burying the drums in an intermittent fashion? What sort of constraints that you had to work through, and what other options did you look at?
Thank you very much. Yes, we did consider other options, and actually one of the options was actually being executed when we found out that the drum that had breached at WIPP came from Los Alamos. So at the time when the incident happened, we did not know that the breach container came from Los Alamos, And we were in the process of, trying to finish our campaign because our concern with the wildfires and, continuing to progress on that. So that resulted in us moving some containers to WCS in Texas, so waste control specialists. Once we realized that the breach container came from Los Alamos, that shipping campaign immediately stopped. There is a number of reasons why we did not move any more drums. One is when we were moving the drums, we weren't aware of the new additional safety hazards that these drums provided. And it became quite evident that there was a risk during the transportation process. And clearly, because we didn't have the right code implemented into the drums, the 001 and 2, we were not authorized to move those drums. So unfortunately, those drums have to remain on site because the risk to transportation is high, and we cannot move them. So just so that you know that we were actually de-inventory the area when we had to stop once we found out it was from the same lot. So we tried, but right now, given the transportation limitations, we cannot do that.
What about the below grade option? Any thoughts on that?
The best option right now is to do the remediation the way we have done remediation for this type of drums in other sites across the country, and that is to solidify the waste and do the dilution with the zeolites and the like. So that is, if you're going to move and touch that drum, you might as well spend the increase in risk to remediate it first. So below grade or anything like that will not be a good option for us because it will again expose the workers to an unnecessary risk.
Thank you. Anything you would like to add to that, Ms. Green?
No, I think that's absolutely correct, and it's also why that the focus has been for all of us those 60 drones, and getting those 60 drones first vented and then remediated, and hopefully when WIPP is open, then shipped back down to WIPP. I mean that is the consuming portion of that area at Los Alamos.
Thank you. I'm going to shift topics a little bit. Ms. Green, earlier today you made a statement to the effect everything happens at the field level. And I would like to, if you could describe for us what level of involvement at the NNSA headquarters and coordination with the Los Alamos field office regarding the development and implementation of the various corrective actions that have been identified since the event. And if you could give us an update on where the department is on those corrective actions.
So our interaction with our Los Alamos field office is pretty much constant. There's so much going on at Los Alamos. In addition to these drums, there's just so much going on at Los Alamos that our interaction at various levels is certainly daily, particularly when you look at all the staff at headquarters and how all the staff at headquarters interacts with the small staff at Los Alamos. So it is a constant interaction. You might also pose that question to our field office manager in the second panel. My guess is there's probably a level at which we've pushed our contact probably too much. But as I do believe, and it is important for our field office managers to be in charge of their sites. Having our field office manager be our eyes and ears on the ground, understanding what's going on, and making all the decisions that they possibly can make is an important aspect of being a field office manager. That said, the safety basis authority is an authority that's held at the headquarters level. And it will continue to be held at the headquarters level. And so that is and that's for everything at Los Alamos. That particular authority is held at the headquarters level. And so that's another opportunity, if you will, for headquarters to be very, very much involved and very closely involved. On the wide range of things, we get updates depending on the nature, at a minimum quarterly on everything that goes on out here. We have weekly staff meetings in which all of our field offices participate, and that's also an opportunity to raise various issues at that, and plus at any given time, and you'll hear from our field office manager on the second panel that any time there's any issue, she calls, she emails anybody at headquarters and gets a prompt response. So it's a very tight and seamless relationship.
Thank you. For my second part of the question, could you give it a high-level update on where you stand with the corrective actions?
Yeah, we do. I mean, particular on,
yes, specific to this.
Specifically on these, we get a lot of updates. There is also at headquarters, we have a series of meetings. Most of the time they occur weekly and go through, and everybody is part of those. It's department-wide, and look at all the very issues associated mostly with these drums and with the actions that are taken with respect to these drums. So it isn't just NNSA that has a very high level of attention, it's the entire department that has a very high level of attention to New Mexico.
And another item is that one of the items that came out was that federal oversight and the functions needed improvements. Could you provide an example of actions taken by headquarters to improve federal oversight at Los Alamos? And you can both. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me take this one first because there's a philosophy going on here that I want to talk about a little bit. So NNSA is, in Monica's words, the landlord for Los Alamos. And obviously one of the findings and recommendations to come out of the Accident Investigation Board was that oversight had failed on a variety of different levels, and in a variety of different corners of the department. At the same time, the NNSA also was looked at extensively by a congressionally mandated panel chaired by retired Admiral Richard Meese and Norm Augustine. In that review, there was extensive criticism, of the NNSA for too much oversight, for having too much transactional oversight. So as we look at both of these recommendations, we find ourselves in an interesting place philosophically. One of the things that we've been trying to do as an NNSA writ large as a result of all of this is try and understand with a very small federal staff, what is it that we need to focus on from an oversight perspective, and where can we put reliance on our various M&O partners. So one of the major elements of that is making sure that all of our M&O partners have a good, strong contractor assurance system, and so that we can look at and use our oversight and our resources from a system perspective and understand in each of those contractor assurance systems that they are looking at the right things, that we're seeing the results in a common way, that we have that we're very confident in what that assurance system is telling us. So not only NNSA, but the M&O also has to have high confidence in what that assurance system is telling them. We're also making sure that going forward, as we implement all of these various reports, that the relationship between headquarters and the field office is very clear, because again, our field offices they are there. They are our eyes and ears are the ground. They are the ones who will see things, and they're the ones that have to work with the contractor. Now, again, from an interesting perspective, NNSA has historically put our oversight energies on those things which have always had the highest risk. And by highest risk, I mean radiological risk, risk to the public, risk to the workers. When you look at this particular event, and the actual repackaging of the material that was going on at the time, this was actually considered a low-risk activity. So all of this has caused us to think about risk, and the department itself has now stood up a risk officer, a chief risk officer, to help us think about risk. So now we're thinking not only in the traditional way in terms of radiological risk, safety risk, explosive safety risk to the public and to the workforce. Now we're also looking at other sorts of risks. Economic risk, which is clearly what this was at the end of the day. This is vast economic fallout, if you will, to the department. Reputational risk. So we're rethinking how we address risk across the board with the contractor assured system and still be able to utilize our small federal staff in the most effective way. So I know that's a very long answer, but it's a very complicated issue and how we approach our oversight responsibilities.
I really appreciate your answer. Dr. Regalbuto, would you like to add to that from the EM's perspective?
Well, it's not from the EM's perspective, as Ms. Greedon very eloquently articulated, is the risk is really across the department, and just because it hasn't happened to somebody else, it doesn't mean there's no risk, right? So one has to have that thinking. Regarding more specific to the WIPP facility and how the corrective actions happen, it was one of probably the most enlightening finding was when the Accident Investigation Board said, really, the best way to protect the facility, which is WIPP, is to extend our bounds of oversight all the way to the generator. So basically, since that waste is being created until it gets to the underground, we must be overseeing these three things, the three activities. So one, and it can easily be summarized as telling WIPP you have to be a much more demanding customer, right? And that is one of the areas that is being addressed under the new chapter of the DSA. So that's Chapter 18. And that is, we have to be much more demanding because we have to protect our facility. We see clearly what happens when you don't do that. In addition, we have the generator, and we have a certification program. So out of the results of the AIB report is the certification program needs to have a headquarters oversight to that program. How do we know that this certification program is actually addressing all the risks that Ms. Creedon has spelled out? So we stood up a new organization, new FTEs, to do that oversight of that certification program. In addition, Trust but Verify from the generator side. So a lot of acceptable knowledge, a lot of things that have been, yes, is there. Now we're going back and checking very specifically all this acceptable knowledge and tracking it all the way from when that waste was generated. And this is not trivial because some of our legacy waste is 30 years old, 40 years old. Records are incomplete and the like. So in those cases, we may have to do more work in the characterization of those materials.
Well, I want to thank both of you for your public service. And since I've been to the board, for what I've observed is your continued fostering of effective communications with the board and our staff, and above all, your continuous commitment to safety. Tomorrow I'll be at Area G, and I look forward to having a productive discussion with the workforce, but also gain a better understanding of the controls that are there and planned to ensure worker and public safety. So in my oversight role, I look forward to sharing any observations I may have from my visit tomorrow with both of you. Again, thank you for your service. Madam Chair, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. The next set of questions goes to Mr. Hamilton.
Dr. Regalbuto, I'd like to talk just briefly about the National Transuranic Waste Program. You said in your opening remarks that the accident at WIPP caused the Department of Energy to fully evaluate its transuranic waste management program, identify weaknesses, and begin to make changes to strengthen the program at Los Alamos and across the DOE complex. You may have been talking about some of this in your last few comments. Are those the kind of specific actions you're taking to improve the National Transuranic Waste Program? Are there other specific things that you could share with us that you're doing to make that a better program in light of the landfill issue?
Yes, thank you. So some of the things that, you will be seeing, obviously at Chapter 18 of the DSA, that takes, more of the facility point of view. In addition to that, there are things that we have already implemented, and that is we have separated the oversight functions from the operational. So if you look at a WIPP org chart, you're going to see that we did that not only for the facility, we also did that for the National TRUE program, because it really is it was conflicted in the past. So it's completely separated, and then there's a third leg, which is a headquarters function that oversees that those operations don't, get mismatched. In addition to that, the site has been working with the National TRUE program and with the generators, and they have looked at, are there other characteristics of waste that we have not evaluated? This was the combination of oxidizers and organics. What about other characteristics? So we stood up a team, and the team went through a very thorough review of all the waste that has been previously generated and packaged and all the waste that is currently moving forward. We found out some, waste streams that we have flagged, and those have not been packaged, so that is a very good thing. But there's still a couple of things where the National TRUE program was still questioning, and those will be set aside. They will not be brought to the underground until they resolve those issues. So in the meantime, probably earlier in the summer, you're going to see a new plan that is going to be put into place by the National TRUE program, and we will be happy to come back and brief you on the new plan. Todd Schrader, who is the field manager at WIPP, is also in charge of the National TRUE program. And with the team that they put together, we'll come back and brief you on all the details of what has changed from how we used to run the National TRUE program and how are we going to run the National TRUE program moving forward. So those are the things that are more tangible, but we'll be happy to, one of our monthly meetings, come back and brief you on that.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, I succeed to the Sullivan.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you. I think we only have a few minutes left. So to Ms. Creedon, we just wanted to ask you about impacts at some of the other facilities here at Landell, because, as Dr. Reglabuto said, Area G is not accepting any more waste. So I know we're still packaging waste at PF4, CMR, WETF. So is that impacting any of the operations there? Do you have enough room to continue to keep that waste basically in-house until we sort of get things straightened out elsewhere in terms of moving this waste?
It's not an impact yet, but it's something that we are all collectively keeping a very close eye on. We are obviously moving things into TA 55, into PF4, where there is space. That obviously is not ideal, but there is space, and it can be handled that way. I personally am also looking at the long term. Obviously, we have a commitment to be out of CMR by 2019. We don't want to have any issues there, so that's also a potential impact, although we should have it all resolved long before then. We have the new True Waste facility that is going to come online shortly after the 1st of 2017. There's been some discussions about the possibility of accelerating that opening. That would also provide some relief in terms of space, but it is a concern. There is some worry that at some point, and don't know when the point is, that operations could conceivably have to shut down if we don't resolve all this. One of the other things that Los Alamos is also really focusing on and has taken the initiative is to also look at how to reduce the amount of newly generated waste. Nothing we can do about the legacy waste that has to move around, but at least with respect to the newly generated waste, they're being very careful to make sure that to the maximum extent possible, they're generating as little as possible so that they don't make this a bigger problem in the near term. But it is something we're keeping a very close eye on.
Okay, so if I specifically asked you, say, next 2-year window, are you reasonably confident for 2 years we're okay?
Let me get back to you on that. There are an awful lot of variables on that, and I think we'd have to take a really hard look, and I think what you'll find is the answer would probably be a range with conditions, but let me get you a much more detailed answer on that one.
Okay, so you'll take that for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from my fellow board members on this panel?
No, Madam Chair.
So I want to thank Ms. Creedon and Dr. Regalbuto for your participation in this process, your cooperation with the board in general, and your willingness to be so open and honest about the challenges that you're facing at Los Alamos. And at this time, I'd like to excuse our distinguished panel members, and we're going to recess the meeting for a short break. The hearing will be in recess, and we will reconvene promptly at 6:45 p.m. Thank you both. The more time we have for public comment. So if I could ask everybody to take their seats so we can introduce the next panel and go back on the record. Thank you for your patience. At this time, I would like to reconvene the hearing and continue by inviting our second panel of witnesses to the witness table. We're back on the record. This panel includes Mr. Doug Hinsey, DOE EM Manager at the Los Alamos Field Office, Ms. Kimberly Davis-Leback, NNSA Manager at the Los Alamos Field Office, Mr. Richard Kasich, Deputy Director of Los Alamos National Laboratory, and Dr. David Funk, Deputy Associate Director for Environmental Management at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. So if I could ask the panelists to take your seats. So for this panel, we've not asked the panelists to make opening statements, but you're obviously welcome to submit any written statements for the public record if you wish to do so after the hearing. As previously stated, the board will ask questions of panel members. The other panelists may seek recognition by the chair to supplement an answer as necessary. If any panelist would like to take a question for the record, the response will be entered into the record of the hearing at a later time. So with that, I think I will take the chairman's prerogative to start with the questioning. And I'd like to start, I think, with you, Mr. Kasich, if possible. LANL spent considerable time and resources investigating the generation of the RNS waste that we spoke about earlier, as well as its associated hazards and the resulting safety approach. Can you summarize the efforts that you've undertaken in this area and the results?
Sure, I'd be pleased to at least start with responding to that question. And I'll start by indicating that as we came to appreciate what had transpired with our drum at the WIPP facility, it became important for us to bring to bear the entire resource complement of the laboratory in terms of understanding what happened, and that obviously took place incrementally over time, and then incrementally figuring out what to do about it, and very much a defense in depth risk reduction approach that covered our entire campaign. So very significant amount of modeling and testing and analyses that were undertaken to identify what went wrong. And then you've heard earlier today, and in fact talked about it yourself to a degree with respect to, again, the defense in depth that's in place in terms of the drums inside a waste storage box, inside a permacom, inside a dome, with ventilation and temperature monitoring, significant remediation measures in connection with the reduction of vegetation and fuel for a potential wildland fire and so forth. And I think I'll take the occasion to draw the distinction about our true waste facility, which is a new facility that has all the protections and redundancies and safeguards against external phenomena and so forth, because it was designed that way. And I'm contrasting that with what we were not able to do with the RNS drums, because we were just in a situation that we had to make the most of it. But I believe we've done that responsibly, and we'll continue to see it through until the day comes when the 60th and final drum is remediated.
So just to follow on to that, and maybe it's to you or to Dr. Funk, we talked a little bit earlier about the conditions that Mr. Sullivan observed, and some of us who were out there observed with regards to the permacon, and perhaps some of the challenges we saw with the temperature control, and whether or not that was there was enough defense in depth to protect all of those layers that you have in place. Can you just answer briefly some of the questions that I think Dr. Regula-Buto deferred to the session?
I could certainly start, and then I think I will defer to Dr. Funk. Obviously, in connection with the speed with which elevated temperatures might occur in the winter months that we've been experiencing recently, if we were to lose the cooling system, it would be not particularly consequential at all. And there are some instances where the amount of time we would have to take action would be more than sufficient to deal with whatever off-normal conditions materialized. And so we have a high level of cognizance across the laboratory about the significance and importance of this issue, and procedures and awareness and training have been upgraded to reflect that circumstance. And I'd like Dr. Funk to contribute to that.
So I'd like to go a couple of different directions. First of all, I think there's directions with respect to facility improvements that Mr. Sullivan was asking about, and the potential threat that the wildfire could have on the cooling system that we have in place. We have begun looking at how we could provide protections. There are plastic components, et cetera, that need to be protected from firebrands that could occur if a wildfire were to take place. And we were looking at how to best protect those assets from those firebrands. In addition, we have started looking at how to have supplemental power, as you alluded to. It's actually not as easy as it sounds because the distribution is quite significant, and so adding that supplemental power is going to be quite challenging. But we will be looking at that. Now, from the technical side of the nitrate salts themselves, or the remediated nitrate salts, we do believe that the passage of time has actually decreased the threat of both internal runaway reaction, but also has decreased the threat of any external temperature posing a risk to the material. The addition of the supplemental vent will also provide additional defense in depth in the sense that if reactions start to occur within the waste drum, the products, which we understand being a part of what led to the runaway, will be vented through the vent, and so we will be protecting the waste by having the addition of the vent. And so those are ongoing measures. And lastly, I think there was a question about the fire blankets. We will be acquiring these fire blankets. What they are effectively radiative reflectors. And these radiative reflectors will help to ensure that the radiant heat from any kind of generated from any kind of a wildfire does not impact the waste.
Okay, just another follow-on question about the venting of the drums, the additional venting that you intend to do. I've had this explained to me a number of times by my staff, and you've been very generous with your time as well. So my question is, with the additional venting, is to prevent a runaway reaction such as we had at WIPP, but does not necessarily impact an insult that comes from a wildland fire. Is that a correct statement?
Not entirely correct. So it is correct to say that it is intended primarily to prevent thermal runaway from a self-initiated event, as we spoke about within the first panel. However, because of the addition of the supplemental vent, again, it will increase the ability to manage the gas that's generated from chemical reactions. We realized that thermal runaway occurred from increase of products that also could react with the material. If that vent is in place, that will mitigate those gases from reacting with the material. Therefore, you would require a higher temperature to actually cause runaway, significantly higher temperatures. And so it actually does increase the overall effectiveness of the safety of the waste in storage.
Thank you. So the final question on this line of questioning I want to ask to Ms. Liebeck, and it has to do with the conversation we had earlier about the non-RNS waste. Dr. Regalbuto described the fact that we had an inadequate understanding of the risk or of the hazards at Area G because we didn't have an understanding of the materials there, the non-RNS waste in addition to the RNS waste. Can you just describe from your point of view the scenarios with the pieces that our technical staff talked about and what you have done to address those? Thank you.
Good evening. PISA is a potential inadequacy of the safety documentation, and so we do have some PISAs outstanding at Area G. We have determined that it's more important to work on the remediated nitrate salt drums first, and then we will attack the remaining PISAs. So PISAs typically come about when you find out something new that you hadn't analyzed previously. And so with the WIPP Accident Investigation Board report of 2015, there was information in that report that we said we may need to go back and look at a few of these factors to make sure our analysis is complete. So we do have some of those actions open. We hope to work on those as soon as we progress through the remediated nitrate salts, because as we heard in panel 1, that is the dominant risk profile for the area right now. So we do intend to work through those analyses, and PISAs are actually a good thing because it means that we're cross-checking with the real world and incidents at other sites and maybe incidents on our site where we can go back and make sure our safety envelope is complete. So we say PISAs are good, and so we will address those remaining items. Also, some of the buried waste we talked about in the first panel. My office approved some of the documentation previously for the above ground, but we said for the below ground activities we would need to approve that at a later date. So we will work that with the laboratory at the appropriate time, and also thinking about those waste forms are contingent on what our regulators at New Mexico Environment Department have to say about those campaigns and when we would get to those. So it's kind of interrelated with our future regulatory approach, and we will address the buried waste at that time.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to turn it to Mr. Santos now for his questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to focus my series of questions to the ventilation and the cooling system, given the importance that they have as a set of controls. So my question to Mr. Hinsey is, can you explain to the public what sort of pedigree and reliability were these systems built to? For example, in the term of art, we call them, are they, for example, safety class or safety significant systems?
Oh, sorry. I seem to not merit a microphone.
Sorry.
Let me go back and talk about the supplemental cooling. That's where you're hitting to. And again, one of the things that we have to make sure that folks understand, as we were, like Rick was saying there, first you have to find out where you are, and then you can figure out what controls to put in place. So when we started out back in the 2015 timeframe, we weren't sure exactly what were the contributing factors. So as Dr. Funk was talking about, we realized that it was a temperature that played a big issue on the thermal runaway. So at that point there, then we just took the controls that we felt were necessary in place based on the information that we needed. In the first panel, we talked about the isolation plan that we had. So we put that in place, and one of those actions was to put the drums into the standard waste boxes in the overpacks. As we did more testing, we realized that the temperature was a big player. And so at that point there, we said, okay, we need to go and implement supplemental cooling so that we can reduce the temperature. Just like said earlier, it's not a big issue in the domes in the wintertime because temperature outside just keeps it almost at 35 degrees. So what we did was we implemented the supplemental cooling, but it's not a safety class system. And so, it was what were those actions that we needed to take in place to address the issue, because at the time, based on the science, we did not have all the answers for, exactly what temperature the thermal runaway may occur. We didn't know exactly what were the causes, what were the mixture in the drums. So we took the most appropriate action at the time based on the information we had. And so the systems that we have in place out there are not safety class systems, are not safety significant systems. So as we go forward with the science and then with the controls we have in place, we're now looking as we go forward to additional controls that may require us to put safety class or safety significant controls in place. But right now, those are not that we have out there.
Thank you. Dr. Funk, if cooling were to be lost, let's say during the summer time, how much time can it remain in that condition before we have a problem?
So I don't know that we would ever have a problem, given the current situation of the waste. And there's a couple of reasons why I would say that. The waste has experienced some temperatures, and again, the passage of time has decreased the overall chemical reactivity that we have observed in the drums. In addition, we have done a number of tests as part of our preparations for processing these materials. We are looking at temperature as a control to help ensure that the chemical reactivity is reduced. In support of those activities, we conducted some tests with full-scale drums in which we use surrogate materials to evaluate how long it takes for the temperature to be moved if it were to be placed in a refrigerator or a freezer. And it turns out that the waste has a significant amount of heat capacity, its ability to absorb heat, and the thermal conductivity, how fast it can transfer, is relatively small. And so as a result, it takes a significant amount of time to change the temperature of the waste. In fact, placing it in a freezer, it takes on the order of 7 to 10 days just to move a drum to the final temperature. So if you were to lose cooling, to raise the temperature significantly would take a significant amount of time. And there would be an ability to have say if we lost cooling for whatever reason, if we needed components, we would be able to replace them in a timely manner such that it would not impact the waste.
Thank you. For this, what I call abnormal conditions like loss of cooling or ventilation, has LANL developed, validated, and practiced some of the procedures that will direct the workforce on what actions to take?
So we have, as part of the supplemental documents for our safety basis, so the evaluation of the safety of the situation. We are including what we call our typical conduct of engineering and conduct of maintenance programs, and effectively those programs are the programs we utilize to ensure the reliability of the systems. And while those are administrative controls, having the appropriate materials on hand and procedures in place are a piece of those particular programs, and so we will be using the typical programs for those activities to ensure that workers are ready and able to repair if we need to.
Okay. You mentioned it'll take some time before temperature starts to change, but do you have stockpile and identify what I consider critical spare parts for some of these systems?
Yeah, so again, that goes back to the whole conduct of maintenance, conduct of engineering, and the aspect is to identify the critical components and then have those critical components on hand to ensure that we will have reliability if a component were to fail. And realize that while we don't really have full redundancy for the cooling system, it really consists of 3 independent HVAC systems that provide the cooling to the permacon, and then a 4th system, which is the supplemental cooling that actually cools the air further. So if you lose 1 or 2, say, of these pieces, we still have additional cooling will help to mitigate that.
Thank you. Mr. Hinsey, could you describe what sort of radiation monitoring is currently present and what type of response times one could expect if one of those monitors is alarmed or alerted?
Right. We have the CAM monitors that are out there that does the airborne radiation that is detected. So by the procedure, I can't tell you exactly what the amount of time. I'll have to defer that to Dr. Funk. But we practice those. As a matter of fact, we just ran a drill last week for the response for a CAM alarm. And so it's the airborne radiation detector, and we have the procedure in place for that. So I don't know exactly what the time is, but I can find out what that is supposed to be.
How many monitors do you have?
I'm not familiar with exactly how many we have out there.
If you could get back for the record, I appreciate it.
I will.
Thank you. No more questions. Chair.
So I'd like to turn to Mr. Hamilton now.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ms. Levack, a few minutes ago you were talking with the chairman about potential inadequacy of the safety analysis PISAs. And what I think I heard you say was that you haven't had the time or resources to complete those because you've been working on more urgent things first. I understand sometimes the urgent gets in the way of the important. In my view, answering these PISAs is important. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your stacking of the priorities of getting these PISAs done, completed, to make sure I understand how you're managing the urgent and important tasks that you're challenged with, if that helps.
Yes, so the remediated nitrate salts are one of the site's main priorities. So working through the phase 1 and phase 2 activities that were discussed earlier are very important. Behind those activities, I think we will see deliverables from the lab on on 3 of the PISAs shortly after the remediated nitrate salt activities begin. So probably on an order of 6 to 8 weeks.
Mr. Kasich, I know from your background that you have a lot of experience in root cause analysis. Can you tell me, have you determined or what your view of the root cause analysis that's occurred for these safety basis deficiencies that are reflected in the PISAs, and what corrective actions you're planning to improve the performance in this area?
One of the challenges I think we faced here is the fact that we're talking about a facility that's not exactly new, and when many of the initial conditions and parameters were put in place, we now have new information that has been brought to light, and so I think that's one of the contributors as to why we are in the circumstances that we are. If you allow me, I think it might be helpful to just to put into context a little bit about Area G. If you looked at the material at risk that was present there in 2007 and compare it to today, about 75% of it is gone. So in the spirit of risk reduction and managing risk at the highest level, I think that's an important consideration. Equally, I think, or maybe not equally significant, but significant is the fact that we have curtailed activities significantly in Area G in recognition of the fact that that we have some work to do to get it back up to snuff and to be operating completely within our safety envelope. I have to admit that I haven't personally delved into the specifics as to how we got into there, but I will certainly look into it.
Mr. Hamilton, if I may, when the lab finds that they are in a PISA situation, the first action they are required to take is to put the facility or activity in a safe and stable situation. And so they have to take whatever actions necessary based on their knowledge at that time to put the operation in a safe situation. And then they notify the Department of Energy. Then they perform their unreviewed safety question review, and then at such time they submit an evaluation of the safety of the situation. So back to your question on the number of pieces, my response stands that 6 to 8 weeks we plan to see probably 3 of the pieces, at least at the ESS status evaluation of the safety of the situation, but the lab would have taken actions to put the facility in a safe situation, so I'm just making a point that it shouldn't be an unsafe situation lingering out there.
That's helpful. Are you saying 6 to 8 weeks from now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for being here. Good to see all of you again. And I think it's happy anniversary to Mr. Hinsey. Is that right? Did I hear that right earlier today? 1 year ago today, you assumed greater responsibilities here?
Actually, no, I've only been here 5 months.
You've only been here 5 months?
That's correct.
Oh, so what happened a year ago?
Actually, we had an acting manager until the end of September.
So the office
The
gets
office has
an
been there for a
anniversary
year.
cake. Okay,
That's
very good. I'd like to ask, I'd like to go back to the subject of emergency preparedness, and I'd like to ask Mr. Kasich. So we've heard all about why the chemistry says less likely to have a runaway exothermic reaction today than, say, back when the waste was generated, and then all these other measures which we've gone over many times to provide defense in depth. Nevertheless, we create emergency response plans for these sort of things. That's what emergency response plans are. They still assume the worst happens. The board sent a letter in January to the Secretary of Energy noting that that the emergency response plan for an accident here at Area G still had not been updated for the potential problem here at Area G. Has that been fixed now?
The area of attentiveness to improvements in our emergency preparedness program is a very significant undertaking, which I'd like to get to. But in the meantime, can I ask Dr. Funk if he's aware of the specific answer?
Yeah, so I can address the specifics for the single drum accident. So the emergency planning hazard analysis has been completed for the single drum accident, and in that case, what is done is that the highest MAR, the highest material at risk drum, is evaluated both for unmitigated and mitigated consequence to see what the potential release would do for both work or public. In the case of the highest MAR drum, which effectively constitutes 40 PE curies, plutonium equivalent curies, when in the mitigated case, the evacuation distance is determined to be 30 meters, and the shelter-in-place distance has been evaluated as being 270 meters. And of course, the unmitigated would be much higher than that. But we currently have the drums stored in the mitigated configuration.
Okay, so again, we're all on the hypothetical here.
Yeah.
You've given us all these reasons why we don't expect this to happen, so I don't want to alarm anybody sitting in the audience, but suppose hypothetically tomorrow we actually did have an runaway exothermic reaction. Who would do what? Tell me, how do we detect it, and then who responds? Can you just walk us through that?
Yeah, so the first part would be detected through the cams. And so there are a number of cams, as we were discussing a little bit earlier. We do have what are called E-cams. E-cams have cellular connective capability, and they are provided to be in contact with our air monitoring individuals. So that would be the first response, because the E-cams are actually located within the permacon. Once an E-cam were to be activated, the folks that have the responsibility to evaluate what they observe when they get that notification would make a determination. They actually get a spectrum of what is the material that was released, and they can actually determine roughly the magnitude of the release. They would then make the call as to whether or not the Emergency Operations Center would need to be set up to provide any kind of additional information to our local communities, and depending on what they learned, they would then move forward with activation of that EOC. We would also have continual air monitoring. There are AirNet stations all around the surrounding area, so there would be additional information that we provided that would be fed back into the EOC, so any other additional actions could be taken.
Okay, but other than evacuation, there isn't any other specific type of thing anybody could go do to try to stop this reaction if it was in fact in progress. Is that correct?
So currently we're in a little bit of an awkward situation from that regard. So what I mean by that is, as you heard Dr. Regulabuto, she discussed where the status of the waste being in what are called standard waste boxes. Those standard waste boxes, as she indicated, have been sealed quite well. And so one of the first steps for us right now is to take the lids off the standard waste box. So if there were an ongoing reaction today, it's very difficult for us to do anything in the way of adding cooling material or any kind of compensatory measure to sort of mitigate chemical reaction. Once the lid is off the waste box, we will actually have a couple of advantages. We will have the ability to measure the temperature directly of the drum, which would be our first sign as to whether or not there are any additional reactions taking place. If we were to observe any additional reactions, then we will be putting together plans for how to add ice water, dry ice, something of that nature, to try to add quick cooling to the drum to try to prevent the accident. And we haven't finalized those plans. They're currently in progress.
Thank you. So back to Mr. Kasich. Another thing we pointed out in our letter to the Secretary back on January 7th was that there was no facility drill program at Area G. Has that been corrected?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have conducted a couple of drills at Area G earlier this month, and I would put it in the category of we've had a improvement initiative underway for some time, and with the benefit of the recognition of the importance of the activities in Area G that's now underway, we're turning our attention to it a little more deeply, and we have a program for exercising that significantly over the upcoming months. And to give you a little bit in the way of statistics about that, we typically run on the order of 5 drills or exercises a month. I did a little checking back. Over the last 30 months, we've done over 100 of them. And to your point about being prepared for everything that you try desperately to never have occur, among the types of incidents that we practice include contamination events, criticality, fires, explosions, medical emergencies, hazmat emergencies, tritium release, biological release, seismic events, loss of power, among others. And so it's a big laboratory with a lot of hazards. We recognize that we need to make sure that safety is prominent in terms of taking care of the workforce, as Dr. Regalbuto talked about it on the first panel. And in connection with executing all of those, it was just about a year ago we put in place an improvement initiative, and of the 67 actions that we set out for ourselves, 61 of them are completed. Now we have to demonstrate that that good intent is going to materialize as we do these drills and exercises, but in the aggregate, I believe they provide confidence that when you couple that experience base and you look at the facility that we have, which I believe is excellent, along with the other capabilities, hardware and so forth that we have, and the experience, unfortunately, of having to deal with 2 very significant events, we're well positioned to attend to this responsibility in the event of some upset condition.
Okay, so, but just to be clear, you talk about 100 drills, but that wasn't 100 drills at Area G, was it?
Correct. It was not.
Okay.
But across the laboratory.
I understand.
But we have a campaign specifically for Area G that's now been mapped out for the upcoming months.
Okay, so it's been mapped out, and
we started earlier this month. Yes,
I look forward to coming back then and seeing how it gets executed. So, Ms. Liebeck, would you address from your oversight perspective? I think you have oversight over the emergency preparedness. Is that correct? Not Mr. Hensey?
We have the site-wide program. So I would echo some of the points that Rick brought up. I mean, there is a site-wide program. We do emergency plans. We have a state-of-the-art emergency operations center that's fully operational. And we do a whole myriad of drills each year, also a site-wide graded exercise each year. We've also been working on some of our readiness activities in nuclear facilities, and so as we proceed through our readiness process, we have the ability to demonstrate operational drills, and so we have seen progress in TA-55 in our tritium facility, and as you can imagine, before we would be able to ship to WIPP, we have readiness activities that we would go through in Area G as well. So I think the site has a program. It's exercised regularly. We deal with Los Alamos County. We deal with some of the local federal agencies at a site-wide level, and we have actually allotted the laboratory for a couple of the major drills that they've done in the last 2 years at the site exercise level. So I think we have a lot of elements in place, but your letter to us in January is certainly correct, and we can improve our program. We're committed to improving our program, and we can improve in Area G as well. But I mean, this panel, we live in Santa Fe and Los Alamos County, so we want to be good neighbors. We want to interface effectively with the towns and the people in the community, and we intend to do that, and we will improve.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hensey.
If you allow me to add to that, my organization is responsible for line management of Area G. So that includes the operational drills. So the operational drills fall under me. You asked the question is, what's the degree of confidence based on the oversight that we have for the program? And I will tell you right now, it's adequate, but it's not at the level it needs to be. Just like Rick said, we put things in place. We've made process improvement teams. We've improved the procedures. We've run some of the drills. I would classify that a lot of the drills, might be a little bit more simplistic at this time. At this stage, we're kind of walking. We're not at the running stage. So we're making the changes that need to be in place. We're practicing and putting everything in place, but it needs to improve at this time.
Okay, well then, just so then for the record, can you take it for the record and get back to us on when we will be running at Area G?
You're talking about in what I would classify as running versus walking? Yeah, I'll get back to you.
Well, so for the benefit of the public, I mean, I've heard a lot of stuff about how good the site-wide emergency preparedness is, but if the individual is at Area G, I think I heard Dr. Funk say, we have these cams, we have these e-cams. They're going to tell the operator there if they've got a runaway reaction, enough information to assess, and then maybe get the emergency operations center man. So if the person at Area G doesn't do the right thing, it doesn't matter, in my view. I don't think it matters how good everybody else is, because everybody else doesn't get notified if the person at Area G. So that's why I'm focusing so much on what is the drill program at Area G. So if you would just get back to us for the record and then tell us when, as you said, when we will be running.
Will do.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So I'm going to shift the line of questioning to the treatment of the remediated nitrate salt waste. And so my questions are going to primarily focus on Mr. Hinsey, as Ms. Levack just noticed. So the question I have is, my understanding is the bridging contract requires Landell to commence treatment for the remediated nitrate salt waste no later than February 16th, 2017. Can you just describe the current treatment strategy and the primary hazard and controls during this treatment?
Sure. And I'll start from the contract perspective. And for our scope as the environmental management program, the treatment of the nitrate salts is the #1 priority that we have. Again, I'm looking at just from the scope that is under the environmental management program as opposed to the entire site programs. So in our contract, 2-year, it's a 1 year with 2 6-month options. And as you state, treatment of the nitrate salts is in February of 17, such that it would be finished before the end of the contract period at the end of the fiscal year. At the time that contract was put in place, it was based on what we knew about the science and as far as what we would have to do to treat the nitrate salts and so forth. At this point in time, we're trying to accelerate that, and yet we have to do it in a safe manner. So as you heard earlier in the first panel and then earlier in this panel, the first thing that we want to do is to increase the margin of safety, which is why we're going to be implementing the supplemental vents. At that point, then we'll turn our attention to the treatment of the nitrate salts. Right now, we're looking at through the science, through what are the engineering analysis, through the facilities. Currently, the treatment would be to first we'll open up the standard waste boxes or the overpacks. We'll go and put the vents in, and then the actual treatment, we'll take the drums, take them in the facility to open them up, and then we'll add the material an inert material that would then reduce or eliminate the hazard associated with the drums. The timing on that, as of right now, we're in the midst of integrating that with our schedule for the supplemental events. So again, our timing is still in that February timeframe. We're hoping to pull it forward, but it's from a simplistic perspective, it's open up the drums, it's to place an inert material in there with the nitrate salts, and then to repackage the drums such that they can be shipped to WIPP when WIPP opens up.
And so from a facility worker standpoint, what are the hazards associated with doing that type of remediation? And I guess the other question I would have is what facilities are you looking at to use it? I know that we've talked about Wicker. There are some challenges with that facility. It might have to be upgraded in order to be able to deal with it, but I know that there are other options on the table. So could you just kind of give us a pros and cons of where you're thinking of doing this, and then what hazards would be introduced to the workers and what controls you put in place to protect them?
Sure. We formed a team that went through the engineering analysis of all the facilities that we could potentially use. One of the facilities is the Wicker facility that you mentioned, which is a Category 2 facility, even though it may need some physical upgrades. We also looked at some temporary type mobile facilities that have been used throughout the complex. One of them down at Savannah River site, another one that was at that is actually at the site. Talked about putting those potentially down in Area G, such that actually where the drums are, we could take them out and try to do the treatment in those areas. We went through a whole vast array of the different engineering analysis, and the result of that engineering analysis is to use that Category 2 facility, the Wicker facility. We then went and formed a team of academia, private industry, and other labs to look at our engineering analysis to make sure that what we were looking at, the right thing, the hazards to the workers, the hazards, for example, of transporting the drums because the Wicker facility is not in Area G. So we looked at all the different aspects that would be potential impacts to the workers, potential risk as far as should something happen in the transport and so forth like that. That report by that team, we just received a draft report, and it should be out in the next couple of weeks. But we believe it's going to confirm that the Wicker facility is the best facility that we have in order for us to, because the other aspect is timing. When you look at the risk over time, many of these other options mean that we would either have to construct some sort of facility or go through the process of placing it, getting all of the technical support and the hookups of ventilation and so forth. And so because we have that facility there, because that facility is made for the nuclear operations, we're heading toward the Wicker facility in order to reduce that risk, eliminate that hazard as soon as possible.
Okay, so my final question, and it's probably to you or Kim, you can share it if you want to, is with regard to the safety basis vulnerabilities at Wicker. I mean, I think that's, from our standpoint, something that we're very concerned about and not sure how you would address those vulnerabilities.
Right now, Wicker is in cold standby, and there's no material in the building. So we have an opportunity to look at Wicker and look at the proposed operation, look at our existing safety basis, and see what we have. But we need to seek the approval of New Mexico Environment Department before we get to the remediation step. So right now, I think the lab's been looking into it, as Doug has alluded and Dr. Funk earlier. So there's a lot of preliminary information, but we still have to look at the proposed activity and look at our safety basis and update it if we need to. So we will have to go through that step.
And let me just add, from a schedule perspective, when we're looking at the facility and the possible upgrades, all of that is being incorporated into the project schedule, and that still fits within that time frame that we have to get the salts treated before the end of next year.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Hamilton?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to go back to a question I talked about earlier, which is the root cause of the original release at WIPP. And this is really going to be addressed to the two field office representatives, but let me set the table a little bit. The Accident Investigation Board identified a number of weaknesses, and I don't need to, I've got a list here, but you know what they are, I'm sure, as well, probably by memory. Generally, they were weaknesses in resolving unreviewed safety question process, the safety culture, oversight of the transuranic waste activities. Ms. Liebeck, can you tell me what actions your office has taken to improve the oversight process in the wake of the Accident Investigation Board's identification of these issues?
Yes, sir. We received the DOE Accident Investigation Board report in April of 15. And since that time, my office received several of the judgments of need. And as you know, there's a table in the document, and you can see if they were field office related, headquarters related, what have you. So we have developed corrective actions for the judgments of needs that were identified in the report. Doug can address his activities subsequently. But we are 30% through our corrective actions at this point, but we submitted our corrective action report probably in August or September of 2015. So with the Accident Investigation Board, we're coming out in April, and then we sat down and did an analysis of what we could do in corrective action space. We've really been working on it for several months. So one of the things called out in the report was the focus of our oversight and our staffing levels. And the report identified some areas where we had had attrition and had not backfilled some of the positions. One of the positions was a senior technical safety advisor, and then most prominently, the report called out facility reps. So those are federal people who actually work in the facilities day in, day out. They're our eyes and ears in the actual nuclear facility or a high hazard facility. So since we also had other judgments of need, but your question pertains to oversight. So I looked at my oversight, I looked at my staffing, I've developed a staffing plan, and I submitted that to our headquarters. I did request additional people for our office. However, I haven't been waiting to see if I receive additional staff. I've talked to my fellow site managers at the other sites. I've had people in on detail, and I've been able to have people come in on rotations, and then NNSA has an intern-like program where we've also been able to get some people in our office. So I have done a staffing analysis. I have requested additional FTEs, but in the meanwhile, I didn't wait. Last year, I had people in. I have different people in this year on detail as well. So we also do a risk-based approach to oversight, and as we have talked about previously, the Wicker and Rant facilities are in cold standby. So right now, those facilities are not requiring a lot of oversight, and obviously not a day-to-day presence in those facilities. So we basically have our facility reps in some of the other nuclear activities on site, like the plutonium facility, the tritium facility. We have a presence at Area G as well. As we have talked about earlier, we are still shipping low-level waste from Area G. There are activities going on with the drums that we have there, and so we are continuing to do oversight, and we are working on our corrective actions. Another activity that we identified to do was an unreviewed safety question assessment of the laboratory. So that's being conducted right now. We brought in people from Albuquerque to assist us in that review. So that's another item that we're doing right now. Another key item was training. So we've gone back and retrained some of the feds on our Code of Federal Regulations, some of our safety orders, and we have another set of training activities to do with our staff, and it's going to get more into the environmental area. So I think we are moving forward on our corrective actions. We will continue to work our corrective actions, and we are continuing to provide oversight at the site.
Mr. Hensey, let me ask you the same question, but before you answer, just for the general information of the public, I want to recognize that your office didn't exist at the time of the release, and so my question then is, what kind of lessons learned are you incorporating into your new office as you move ahead?
Right. Well, first off, as a result of the Accident Investigation Board, there were 5 corrective action plans that were written. One by the contractor at WIPP, one by the federal organization, one by headquarters, and then there was one by the Los Alamos contractor, and then there's actually a joint corrective action plan by my organization and Kim's together. So even though we didn't exist at the time, we have corrective actions to do as a result. So the things that we have to do is twofold. First is what about the corrective actions that came out of the lands, the contractor corrective action plan. So we're in the midst of overseeing implementation of that. Some of the things that they've done from corrective action are changing the organizational structure, putting in a waste processing division, changing out the management teams, changing the procedure, because one of the issues corrective action was the configuration control. We heard about the procedure that talked about the inorganic versus the organic, and how it was a quality assurance type of issue. So configuration control, all of those procedures, all of the organizations in place, both Kim and I are responsible for making sure that those corrective actions by the contractor are being put in place, and even more importantly, that they're effective as they're being put in place. So that's our responsibility as far as overseeing the corrective actions of the contractor. For us, one of the big things is, just like you were talking about, is formation of the new organization. The individuals that were overseeing the environmental management scope moved over to my organization. So we had to establish everything from setting up the procedures, defining the roles and responsibilities between Kim and I as far as the split between us and them. And then I have to build my organization. Right now I have authorization, or I had authorization for 26 with 21 people here. Just recently we got authorization to increase that to 41 individuals. So even though I don't have the people here, we have filled the resources that we needed in different ways. One is through details from other sites with people who have the subject matter expertise, relying on Kim's organization. As we've talked earlier, Kim is still responsible for the safety bases, but when I actually staff up my organization, when it is time, we will move over and have responsibility for the safety bases. So we're in the midst of hiring those extra people. In the meantime, we're also going back to the subject matter experts from headquarters. We have a lot of support from both NNSA and EM for sending folks down to help us from a subject matter expert perspective. And then we actually have staff augmentation from contractor. So that's how we're filling up the shortfall in the resources. The other issue that really came out in the corrective action was the need for training. And so because it's a joint corrective action plan between Kim's organization and mine, we're doing a lot of the training together on integrated safety management system, on the safety bases and so forth. So we're completing the training and we're staffing up so that we can fulfill our oversight responsibilities.
Thank you both, and I'll just close this set of questions by saying that I recognize what you were saying earlier, Ms. Liebeck, about the urgency of putting the facility in a safe condition and then working on these important issues, which are the core issues to prevent a recurrence. And it sounds to me like from the two answers I just got here that you recognize that. And so I appreciate that, and I have no more questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Same theme, corrective actions for the accident investigation report, but I'm going to shift my focus away from the federal government oversight to the laboratory. Mr. Kasich, one of the comments in the accident investigation report had to do with safety culture, and it said that there were pockets in the laboratory where there were some employees who were afraid to speak up and raise issues that might stop production. Safety culture can be kind of a touchy-feely thing, but there were employees from the Wicker facility who actually told the Accident Investigation Board that they saw indicators like smoke or foaming of a chemical reaction that they didn't expect to see when they were mixing this organic absorbent with the nitrated salts, but nobody said anything. Has that problem been fixed?
I won't say that it's a fixed or unfixed. I don't consider it to be a binary type of situation. It's a case where our performance is on a continuum and we're set about to improve it. Similar to one of the questions that Commissioner Hamilton raised earlier about, or the implication of one of his questions about the health of our contractor assurance program and corrective actions in general, the first thing we need is a workforce that understands that the only issue we can't solve is the one we don't know about. And so an environment where people are that's not just okay, but it's recognized as it's part of your day-to-day responsibility that if something isn't right to speak up, that's foundational to be able to get those problems identified and fixed in a lasting manner. One of the initiatives that we have underway is through our worker, help me with the term?
Safety and security.
Our worker safety and security team, thank you. And it is there that we mobilize groups of employees at the worker level supported by management, and the entire foundation of that campaign is to have them come forward and say, what isn't working for you about your particular work environment so we can get it on the table and get it resolved. At recurring meetings, we have senior leadership come in and talk about what their various organizations have done in that regard in the spirit of creating a little peer pressure and also sharing success stories, so that is becoming increasingly part of the culture. So the fact that how you started this question indicates that we have need for improvement, but I believe that we have the right management focus and worker engagement to get that back on the right track.
Okay, can you briefly tell us, from the senior level on down, Dr. McMillan on down, what is your personal engagement in this sort of thing? So, do you go and speak to the employees at the various specific facilities to try to gauge, what issues they're facing, that sort of thing? Could you please speak to that?
Surely. I am actually the champion for the laboratory in this regard. So I take it seriously, and so I have recurring meetings with the staff of people who put our program in place with recognition that it has to be a laboratory-wide initiative. I went to a meeting last week or the week before, and I have to, in the spirit of full disclosure, I was late getting to the meeting. And so I managed to get there for the last half of it, roughly. And I listened to an individual express a considerable amount of frustration about her work environment, where the temperature in her workspaces was occasionally above 90 degrees, and the air conditioning system was competing with the heating system, which was causing a lot of noise. And it was a disturbing anecdote to take in. And one of her comments in explaining this to me at the meeting was that she had been frustrated about getting some attention on this up until that point in time. And used words to the effect of, I didn't know where else to go. And I said, yes, you did. You just told me. Thank you. And I really appreciate that. And then I interacted with the individuals in our organization who have the responsibility to get that addressed. I heard back from this individual within the next 48 hours that the response was fantastic, and she was very appreciative of it. And we have follow-up actions in place just to make sure that it gets taken care of. So in many respects, it's a small thing relative to 60 R&S drums, but it's not really a small thing. And every opportunity that is either given to me or I can create to make it clear to the workforce that we care about their well-being and that we need them to identify issues so we can get better is something that's on my personal agenda daily.
Thank you. Would you stop into my office in Washington, D.C. next time you're there? The heating and cooling doesn't work very well.
Yes, sir.
It's a leased space, and we don't own the building. One of the other, just quickly though, one of the other corrective actions has to do with the safety basis determination. There were some specific things about, it was called a bio at Wicker, I believe, but basis for interim operations, different term, same basic concept. But it had to do with, again, the contractor assurance system and how well there was, how much rigor there was in that process and how much internally how much the laboratory was making sure the people responsible for that were doing the right things. Again, can you just address some of the corrective actions that have been taken there?
Yes, sir. So you're correct that our contractor assurance system has had some identified weaknesses. When we talk about that subject matter, we tend to use a description of 5 pillars, and they are metrics, assessments, issues management, process improvements, and lessons learned. We put in place some new leadership, with the leadership relatively new to the laboratory, in fact, this calendar year. And it's vested in a place in the organization where I have a lot of confidence that we're going to start to realize some of the improvements that we need to make. We have a multi-year plan in recognition of the significance of the challenges to realize the improvements that we have ambitions to achieve over the upcoming period of time that we're going to be on this contract. I'll put it that way. And as recently as within the last week, the status of that program was briefed to the senior team, because it's, again, one of those instances where it's the entire laboratory that needs to own the responsibilities to effect those improvements. So beyond what I've already talked about, the area of undertaking causal analyses in a thoughtful and meaningful way, so with the right expertise, so that when something goes wrong, we're really able to get the bottom of it and engage what we call now learning teams, so that the people who are directly involved in a particular incident have the opportunity to have a great hand in being the architect of the solution, and an increased emphasis on human performance across the laboratory as well. And then when we get those corrective actions identified, we track them in a database so we don't lose anything. And to the point that Mr. Hinson made earlier, after there's been sufficient runtime, we need to undertake effectiveness reviews to make sure that we've really sustained the improvements that we intended with those actions. So again, we have much to do, but I believe we have the right leadership in place. And again, it's led by Dr. McMillan to effect those improvements.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Mr. Santos?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Libak, you mentioned that some of the PISAs 6 to 8 weeks from now. Do you expect any additional controls that might need to be added to handle the other non-RNS waste, to deal with the risk associated to the other type of waste?
I'll have to see what the analysis says first, and then we can see if there's controls that are derived from the analysis. So also, I think as we've discussed previously, we can have a control in place. It can be a defense in depth control. It may not rise to the pedigree of safety class or safety significant. And so if we follow how the analysis, the hazard analysis and accident analysis, what we see. If the controls are derived, then so be it. But also, as the federal approval official, the feds can add controls if we see fit. If the lab can come to us and say, we don't think they're warranted in this case, but we can add additional controls as well. So we'll see, we'll have to see how that analysis shakes out.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing those results. We have focused on wildland fires primarily. Are there any other risks that you analyze and consider for all waste at Area G?
We have the suite of accidents in the current bio. I mean, that can be a truck colliding with, you know, a waste drum. And as you know, the waste activities are very manual processes. And in some cases, you may have a process where you can automate it. But in this case, it's a very manual process, so we have several administrative type controls. And those are the controls we have in place now, but we do have some passive features that we rely on, like in the instance I just mentioned, that if a truck veered into a waste drum, we have Jersey barriers that would, you know, deter the truck from colliding with the drums. That's just one example. We can also control how many drums are in what facility, and we know the contents, we know the material in the drum, so we can control it by that mechanism. So lots of administrative type controls we have for the accident scenarios.
Thank you. Different question. Once WIPP reopens, is my understanding that in order for true waste to be shipped, you need the RAND facility fully operational? Is that correct?
We could do loading outside, but there's temperature conditions that we would have to constantly be monitoring, like wind and what have you. You can't load the trucks if it's very high wind. You wouldn't want to do that. It wouldn't be the safest situation. So we could do the mobile loading. We'll have to see, you know, when that time comes. We'll have to see where we are. We have identified some seismic upgrades. We have received correspondence from you on the seismic analysis of the ramp facility, and we will have to make upgrades to that facility. The lab has begun engineering on the seismic upgrades. It would probably be our preference to load in the ramp facility, but we would have to complete those facility upgrades first. But in the meanwhile, it is an option to load outside in the appropriate conditions.
So your current schedule for RAND facility, when do you think it'll be ready to go? What year?
So currently we have funding this FY to do the engineering analysis for the seismic upgrades, and we plan on implementing those upgrades in fiscal year 17.
And the duration of that effort, roughly?
It's a year-long effort to do the upgrades.
Okay. Thank you. No further question, Madam Chair.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to truncate this last line of questioning because I think Ms. Creedon addressed it somewhat, and it has to do with the newly generated transuranic waste and the issues with the fact that you can't ship to WIPP right now, you can't accept waste at Area G, there is a buildup of transuranic waste, and she even mentioned, you know, the issue of having more drums at PF4, which is obviously kind of contrary to our goal of MAR reduction at PF4. So just along those lines, to state that we have an ongoing concern in this area and would like to understand better what your processes are going forward with the transuranic waste facility. I understand that you want to accelerate that, but that's limited to a specific type of waste, and you'll still have to think about adding additional drums to Area G at some point once the drums are remediated, the 60 RNS drums, in addition to some of the other pieces that have to be addressed. So I guess the last question would be, with the physical capacity for additional drums being available at Area G, but obviously that's at odds with the limited life status of Area G, have you looked at temporary receipt of newly generated waste for continued risk reduction work at PF4, for instance? And I guess that's to Mr. Hainsey.
Sure. One of the things that we have formed is a working group, and we have an enduring waste strategy that we've been developing, and that's in coordination with us on the environmental management side as well as the NNSA side with the contractor. When you're talking the newly generated waste, that doesn't fall under the scope of the environmental management, but because we're the ones that are responsible for WIPP, so I'm fully involved in that there in helping to prioritize when WIPP does come open. So part of the enduring waste strategy, the NNSA side and brought before the team has looked at several different ways on how to address the waste issue that's coming out of PF4 or the being stored at TA55. So one of the first things was is look at it from a waste minimization perspective. So significant effort has gone into how do you make sure that you're not generating that waste to start with. And so they've made significant improvements, and we can look at what the numbers would show as far as what waste has not been generated that previously was put in containers that would be considered, that would go to transuranic waste. Second area they're looking at is segregation of waste, making sure that only the waste that truly is true goes into those in the containers. We have a Green is Clean program, and so it's making sure that we're segregating the waste appropriately so that everything only goes into the true as it should. We talked about the storage in the different areas, temporary storage. I walked through those different areas to make sure that I understood from the EM perspective, because eventually, like we're talking about, it goes to the WIPP. And so what are the things that we can do as a coordination from a site perspective? So one of the things that we just heard talking about was transuranic waste facility, and so part of that enduring waste strategy is once we finish with transuranic waste facility, that some of the waste that would be in the TA55 or over at PF4 would be moved in that transuranic waste facility. Still have to do some efforts there as far as what waste can be stored there and for how long, but then that will free up more of the space that's in TA55 and PF4. From an EM perspective, Area G is a closure location, and so once we get our handle on the nitrate salts and treat those salts, and then we address when we're talking about the other pieces, we get a handle on that, then it'll be a coordinated effort on how does it integrate with the shipping schedule for WIPP, because we'll start to ship off at some limited rate the material to WIPP, and then the last thing is, like you're saying, is looking at if there is a need or a potential that we could, once we get the handle on all the rest of the pieces and so forth, that there would be potential to move some of the waste into Area G. But again, right now that's not on board until we go through all of the other pieces and we address the nitrate salts.
So can I recap that to say that you're looking at this from an entire Los Alamos point of view, how to deal with this waste and what goes where when, and flexibility in that area?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask my other board members if they have any additional questions for the panel?
No, Madam Chair.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come speak with us today and for the information that you've presented to us. Again, thank you, and you are free to go. So at this time in the hearing is our public comment time. Our public comment time. First, I'd like to recognize some folks in attendance here today. Secretary Ryan Flynn from the NM Department of Environment and his staff is here, I believe. Secretary Flynn? No? No? Was here? And we also have some folks from the Hill represented. We have Senator Udall's staff here, as well as Congressman Lujan and Lujan Grisham's staff, so I appreciate them coming down and participating in this event. So, as noted before, there is a list of speakers who contacted the board ahead of time, and that was posted at the entrance of the room. We've generally listed the speakers in the order of which they've contacted us, if possible, when they wish to speak. Our general counsel will actually call the speakers in this order, and I ask that speakers state their name and their affiliation at the beginning of their comments. There's also a table in the room for sign-up sheet for members of the public to wish to make comments in addition to those who have already notified us and who have already signed up. To give everybody wishing to make a comment equal opportunity, we ask that speakers limit their original comments to 3 minutes, and we'll give consideration for additional time as the schedule allows. So please remember that remarks should be limited to comments, technical information, or data concerning the subject of this public hearing, which is the materials located at Area G at Los Alamos, and the true waste issue. And the board members may question anyone who provides comments to the extent deemed appropriate. So I'm going to turn this over to my acting general counsel, Mr. Biggins, to identify the speakers for your 3 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have 20 individuals signed up to speak this evening, including 10 individuals who pre-registered to speak. I will call the speakers in the order in which they signed up, and as the chairman noted, we ask that each speaker please limit their comments to 3 minutes. I will let each speaker know when they have reached 3 minutes by requesting that they conclude their comments. The board is keeping the hearing record open until April 22nd in case anyone would like to submit a written statement or document into the record. And we will need to make sure that the speakers speak into the microphones that are placed in the room so that the court reporter can pick up the comments. I'd like to call the first speaker, Mr. Greg Mello, and then we will go to Marion Sheeran and Rebecca Moss after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Connery and members of the board, and Principal Deputy Administrator Creedon and Assistant Secretary Regal Butov, if she's still here, as well as Field Office Manager Lebac and Hensey also. Nice to see you. I've been, for those who don't, I'm with the Los Alamos Study Group. I'm the Executive Director of the Los Alamos Study Group. I'm here with my coworker and wife, Trish Williams-Mello. I've been sporadically involved with LANL environmental and safety issues since 1984, when, as a representative of the Environment Department, I was the first external regulator to visit Los Alamos National Laboratory to enforce environmental law there. In my case, hazardous waste law. Subsequently worked on groundwater monitoring, vadose monitoring at Los Alamos. And I have to say that as we approach this issue tonight, much of it feels very familiar. It feels like we've been over this territory before. And back in 1984, the state was looking into how we could close Area G. Area G was actually required to be closed under RCRA by November 1985. Area G was never was an admitted hazardous waste disposal site, submitted a Part A application, but never a Part B. Neither was it ever experienced closure. So it's been in a, if you like, in a legal limbo since 1985. All the problems that we see today at the laboratory have deep roots. deep roots in the culture, deep roots in the failure of regulators like myself to be able to get our arms around the problem. We have a problem here in the state of political independence. Department of Energy has a different kind of problem in that Congress has limited its staff, as you're well aware. Ms. Leback needs more staff. Mr. Hinsey needs more staff, and it's hard to get them. We went through we acquired a kind of fad a few years ago, I would call it that, of a contractor assurance system, which was meant to replace the need for some of this federal staff. It's really a subset of the broader move toward privatization in our society. I spoke at a Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board hearing in Los Alamos adamantly against putting in place a contractor assurance system here at Los Alamos. And I think that the General Accounting Office and the Inspector General in their congressional testimony also spoke very negatively about reliance on a CAS at high-hazard nuclear sites.
Mr. Mello, will you please conclude?
Yes. Are we coming to the end already?
Yes.
So the narrowness of this hearing it's reassuring to know that as we do, that the Defense Safety Board is bringing a laser focus to these technical issues. On the other hand, it's concerning because the broader issues of safety culture, of management at the laboratory, the structural issues are the root causes of this particular accident that has brought us here and is keeping and is percolating down through the problem of the 60 drums that we've been talking about most of the evening. And we haven't really got at those root causes. Am I completely out of time?
Yes. And we recognize it's a short period of time for speakers.
Perhaps I'll get another chance to talk later. And
yes.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so Marion Sheeran, please. And then we'll go to Rebecca Moss.
Good evening. My name is Marion Shireen. I am a retired city planner, 42 years a resident of Santa Fe. Planning, when done right, and implemented in a spirit of goodwill, can have many positive effects on a region and state. First in a plan is the why. What is the vision or mission based on the needs of a population? Second are the whats. What are the goals? What is to be done to accomplish the mission? In very briefly, 5 or 6 goals maximum. In this case, in Los Alamos National Lab, safety should be one of these goals, and transportation another one. Third are the hows. How is implementation of the goals to take place? Budgets, timelines, personnel, action plans, etc. And in the case of Llano, all of these smaller portions of a plan are the tail wagging the dog. Finally, and perhaps most important, is the evaluation and amendment or total change of the vision or mission statement of the plan. So an iterative and participatory process designed to achieve long-term success is necessary at Los Alamos National Labs. This comprehensive process has never, in my experience, been implemented by Los Alamos National Labs. I hope that this panel will help to rectify this extreme and dangerous oversight. In closing, I will read a short poem about 599, a highway with which I have an intimate relationship. WIPP route, Yellow Cake Highway, 1 year, 1 crossroad, 25 crashes, only 1 fatal. Thank you for your attention to these matters.
Thank you, Ms. Sheeran. Rebecca Moss, and then we'll go to Astrid Weber and May Britt Eagle.
Hi, I'm actually not intended to be registered, so I don't need to comment. Thank you.
Okay. Astrid Weber.
Hi, my name is Astrid Webster. I am a volunteer for the Los Alamos Study Group, and I have a question to ask, which may or may not be answerable. I would like to know how many of the people who have spoken and testified so far are federal employees versus private contractors.
So I would say 4 out of the 6 panelists were federal employees versus contractors.
I am responding somewhat to the words environmental management. I would submit that the effort to manage the environment through nuclear weapons has not only created a lot of work for a lot of people who define their work as defense, it has redefined what efforts we need to make and keep discovering as new levels of damage that thrust has revealed. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard recently said, while questioning a member of the nuclear weapons community, "I've seen the pictures, and I'd like you to know there are pictures in my backpack," because a few years ago I volunteered at the Los Alamos Disarmament Center, and we had very large pictures there. And what I realized, having been part of the German rocket community as a young child, that the truth about that's never been fully revealed. And I've been learning in my permaculture class that nature bats last. And I would submit to you that nature's not through batting yet. I remember hearing about green glass that was innocently brought home from the Trinity site. And imagine, I have a sister born in Peenemünde who just wrote a letter to the New Mexican about this very topic we're discussing. I was born in Landshut, Germany. We went to El Paso, Texas, and ended up a good portion of my childhood very near the Trinity site, less than 90 miles away. My father ended his career as the chief scientist at Holloman Air Force Base. Many, many times as a child, I saw contrails, we heard sonic booms over our farm, and the work there has only partially been revealed. And I would submit to you that what has happened at the Trinity site is only now being revealed. There are downwinders who are ill. And so all of your well-intentioned and good-hearted efforts to control this haven't stopped the damage caused by the peaceful atom. They haven't stopped the damage at Chernobyl, nor at the Columbia River, nor at 3 Mile Island. And the toll keeps going up and up and up as Fukushima spews away. And what I would like to say is nature is not nearly done with us yet. And I think this industry was born out of a wish to dominate. It was born out of a wish not only to conclude World War II, which was pretty much concluded, but a desire to win it so decisively that no one would ever raise their head again. And I just went recently to the deterrence school at Kirtland Air Force Base. And the amount of chutzpah there and the belief that they had command was truly astounding. And I know you're working really hard. I know you're trying really hard. And the truth has neither been revealed yet, nor has it been written. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. Maybritt Eagle, and then we'll go to Mr. Don Hancock and Ms. Melissa Larson.
My name is Maybritt Eagle. I'm loosely affiliated. I'm a student of Citizens for a Non-Radioactive Environment. We study the Livermore Laboratories in California. But as I'm a resident here in New Mexico, I'm also a student with the Los Alamos Study Group. We realize that the Nuclear Safety Board convenes tonight because cost ought not to override safety or profit outweigh the health of the environment, the workers, the communities, those who will inherit the earth. So we're grateful for this hearing. Admiral Hyman Rickover trained my husband, a captain in the nuclear submarine force. The rigor of nuclear power school, its stress on safety and technical training as its highest value, contrasts to the lax standards and less than moral integrity we witness in New Mexico. While stationed with the submarine force in Groton, Connecticut, we attended a class in nuclear weapons offered by the American Friends Service Committee, studied the Strategic Intercontinental Operating Plan, the varying capacities of strategic intercontinental tactical theater and suitcase nuclear weapons, and the toxins generated by their production. Few have the ability to look this Medusa in the face without their hearts turning to stone. Yet it is this knowledge we require of you, of any who would manage things nuclear. What I noticed in our inquiry this evening is that this knowledge has not awakened a robust and healthy fear. We fear because we've learned to love, a love of place and life. Prince Andrei in Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace lies wounded in a meadow among the blood of his comrades, gazing at a very blue sky. His thoughts are in stark contrast to what we know today. He imagines the pure, clear waters of the earth to be perennial, enduring. The earth is always renewed in the spring. But the management of nuclear waste, as we have heard this evening, threatens this vision. We in Santa Fe ask that you impose 3 qualifications on those who assume responsibility for our safety: rigorous technical training on a par with Admiral Rickover's, a scrupulous respect for safety, and a robust and healthy fear such that the love of place and life overrides consideration of cost. Failing this, it is in the public interest to close this facility.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock.
Good evening. I'm Don Hancock from Southwest Research and Information Center based in Albuquerque, a 45-year-old organization that works on a variety of environmental justice and natural resources and health issues. I've been involved with nuclear waste issues and the WIPP site for more than 40 years. So my first quick point is I very much appreciate the board being here tonight, the board having officials come and speak to the public and answer questions, something that should happen frequently but does not happen frequently in a public context. In that regard, I also appreciated you going to Carlsbad on April 29th last year to have a hearing on WIPP. The board, as you know, but many people in the audience don't know so well, is very small and understaffed itself. In addition to Los Alamos and WIPP problems, you have to deal with Livermore and Pantex and Oak Ridge and Savannah River Site, not to mention Hanford and Idaho and other difficult places. So I appreciate that, and the point of saying that is that A, you are appreciated, and B, we need to have you do even more, and I know that's a hard thing to hear, but especially related to WIPP, it's going to be very important. 3 words that to me were recurring tonight, but I'm going to use a little different context for them. One is rush, another is safety, and another is delay, and they're all related. Los Alamos was in a rush to complete the 3706 program to get this waste, including these nitrate salts, to WIPP by June 30th, 2014. And in rushing to do it, did they succeed? No, because they weren't focused on safety, and the rush resulted in delay, not safety and not accomplishment. As Greg Mello said, and as many people say, we've been here before. Los Alamos' shipments to WIPP have been shut down before. because of violations. And we were assured then it wouldn't happen again. It did. WIPP is now rushing to get open before Secretary Moniz leaves office. Not a good reason to reopen the facility. Not a good reason to take care of safety, and what it's going to result in, I would argue, is further delay because there are going to be more problems. The facility is unable. The facility was a start clean, stay clean facility. It's now a start clean, be dirty facility. So it will have to operate totally differently if it's to operate at all. It can't get back into operation from a ventilation standpoint the way it was in February 2014 until 2021 at the earliest. And that's based on not having a schedule and not knowing what the costs are of the new ventilation and exhaust shaft down there. So the idea that WIPP is going to open soon and solve Los Alamos 60 drums and other drums is a myth. The Idaho National Lab has more than 600 shipments ready to go and a legal requirement that they be out in 2018, which will be missed. So it's distressing for people who are here to kind of hear that solutions are going to come maybe in the next 2 years or so, and I appreciate the board trying to pin down some of those time frames, but it's not going to happen.
Mr. Hancock, would you conclude, please?
The last thing to say is safety culture at Los Alamos is weapons culture, and at WIPP it's expansion culture. Rather than the reason WIPP had the problems that it did is because it was focused not on its mission of operating safely, but on expanding the facility. It's still the Department of Energy and its various offices' goal to expand WIPP to surplus plutonium, to greater than Class C waste. And the nuclear energy part of DOE is in the process, as we speak, of doing a, quote, consent-based process to get the folks in southeastern New Mexico to consent to WIPP being expanded to be the nation's defense high-level waste repository. That's not the way to have either safety or assurance from the public that we're not going to see this same record played over and over again to the detriment of workers and the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Larson, and then we'll go to Mr. Herbert Lester Plum, and then Mr. William Moulton.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for doing this forum tonight. I suppose we're getting some information about the activities at Los Alamos, but why empty Area G in order to fill it again with more waste? Is that what we're emptying this out for? Are we continuing to produce nuclear weapons in Los Alamos and causing more waste? I think, what is the WIPP remediation? What happened to Rocky Flats, and why is Los Alamos invested in making plutonium triggers for nuclear weapons? What is the cap for the MAR, or what is the corrective action plan for materials at risk? What is the JON for true waste? What is the judgment of need for transuranic waste? What is the potential inadequacy of safety analysis? Could it be that plutonium escapes into the environment and there is no safety in that? What would be the damage ratio? What part of nature would be damaged in northern New Mexico, like Rocky Flats, a Superfund cleanup site? Well, the waste characterization and reduction and repackaging that weakened, I think it was some kind of plutonic waste. Is that I'm not saying satanic, but it seems like it could be very destructive to the world and nature and this beautiful place that we all live here. And we have to figure in the future of the generations and what might be the real safety implications of continuing the program at Los Alamos today, even though we really didn't get a good idea of what they are doing now. But we know that there's a lot of federal government funding that goes into supporting the work over there. And if it's causing the people to get harmed by lots of cancer in the area, and I think that those kind of things need to be investigated about the true safety and true, as in transuranic waste, what is true safety. So I'm just here because I'm a concerned citizen, and I've lived here ever since they were trying to make the WIPP facility down there, and of course protested that because it could be unsafe to the people in New Mexico, and it's proved that it probably was unsafe and maybe will be unsafe when it's reopened again. I think the whole mission of Los Alamos may be unsafe to the people of New Mexico and the planet, and I think we need to reconfigure what we are doing over here and what is the need for the planet and the scientists who know a lot at Los Alamos. I'm very interested in chemistry and the elements and what this earth and what it all means for all of us. But I think we must be careful about how we're using these elements and what we're making from them, since we can make destructive things and creative things from nature. And I'm concerned about the safety of the destructive enterprise of making nuclear warheads in this world today, when war isn't over and war is just beginning maybe again. So I'm just going to leave those thoughts with you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Mr. Herbert Lester Plum. Mr. Plum? He was signed up in advance, so I don't know if he's present tonight. So we'll go to Mr. William Malton, and then we have Susan Musgrave. Mr. Malton?
Thank you, members of the board. My name is Willem Malton. I'm a baker here in Sante Fe, and I'm also a member of the Los Alamos Study Group. My little talk here likes to stress three things: institutional amnesia, no place for more waste with WIPP being closed, and the legal responsibility and consequences of what happened here. Okay, so almost 20 years ago, June 8th, 1997, I had some time to waste in Los Alamos. Around the pond, in this Ashley Pond, in the center of Los Alamos, there happened to be a fair with some rides, etc. But there was also displayed a series of emergency vehicles for the audience, mainly children, to explore. In front of the fire truck, there was an instrument on display that I had never seen before. 4 legs and some kind of cutting tool looking like a knife point hanging in the middle. So out of curiosity, I asked some questions to the attending officials. They were quite proud of this tool, since they had invented it themselves right there at the laboratory. It was a remote 55-gallon drum opener. Why would you need it? Well, on Area G and under those tents, there are many, many of these 55-gallon drums. They explained to me that sometimes one of these barrels would swell up and explode. just like what happened at WIPP. But we are talking here about a much longer time ago, 1997. And before they had the instrument that was now on the fair, one of the employees of the lab would have to forcefully open a swollen drum, and some of the content would spray out and threaten to cover the employee as well as the environment. And it happened often enough that they had to invent this tool, a remote 55-gallon drum opener, so as to prevent at least the direct human contamination. How often do these drums swell up, I asked. Oh, in the last months only, personnel of Area G had decommissioned more than 8 drums. And what was the cause of the swelling? I was told then, in 1997, the drums used to have an asbestos lining, toxic to humans, but very stable, and the personnel was told then in 1997 the drums used to have they decided to switch to an organic compound, just like the kitty litter.
Mr. Moulton, will you please conclude your remarks?
Okay. Okay, doing more of the nuclear work at Los Alamos without being able to store the waste at WIPP is irresponsible. And I think the people that are responsible for this kind of activity, just like BP in the Gulf, they should have face legal consequences.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Susan Musgrave. Okay. Ms. Musgrave was pre-registered, so I don't know if she's in attendance tonight. And we'll move to the list of speakers that signed up this evening. Mr. David Torney, and then after Mr. Torney, we have Louis Latofa and Violet Albee. Sir, that microphone doesn't seem to be on.
David Torney from Hema Springs, and I want to ask your help in preventing the sending of any more plutonium to Los Alamos Laboratory. If you can do that, I'm speaking on behalf of Mother Nature, and I want you to do your best. This part of the country is a wildlife refuge. We've had enough bad things come here from outside. It's time to put an end to it. You can deal with the legacies, but we want to prevent bad things happening in the future. And here's a picture I took in the Rio Grande Gorge a couple weeks ago. Keep this in mind when on your travels. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to submit the picture for the record? Okay. My associate counsel can take a picture of that. So now we have Mr. Louis Latofa.
Good evening. My name is Louis Tafoya. I'm from Taos, New Mexico, retired military. And my concern on this radiation and waste materials is come to my attention quite a bit because we don't realize how serious it is to have the damage and the dangers of nuclear waste, radiation, until it hits your family and your community. And right now, Taos County is now has got the highest rate of cancer deaths compared to any county in the state of New Mexico. And that's because of the what the Los Alamos called a scientific experiment when they released radiation up in the Taos County area in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And their experiment was to see how many, what would it do to the animals, domestic and wildlife. And when that happened, after the Los Alamos decided that they would start investigating how much radiation these animals had, they went up there and they started taking these animals, and they would shoot them down, tranquilize them, pick them up with a helicopter, and take them to Blanco, Colorado, to be examined to see how much radiation these animals had, and to see how much radiation the consumers would be affected. Well, like I say, right now, Taos County has got the most deaths by cancer in the state of New Mexico. There was and I got to give credit to the Los Alamos for trying to convince us that it was the space aliens that were killing these cows and animals. They were shooting them down. But, they did all kinds of propaganda to convince us that it was the space aliens that were killing these animals, domestic and wildlife. I've got a picture here of a cattle sign. It's all over the state, all over the county of Taos. I want to pass it out if you want. Well, the Los Alamos did a good job of trying to convince us that it was the space aliens that were doing this to the animals. The findings of 2 law enforcement officers in Taos County, one was a state police officer and the other one was a cattle inspector. When they did their investigation, they found that these animals were being shot at, picked up by helicopters, taken to Blanco, Colorado for examination. After they examined the animals to see how much radiation they had, they'd come back and drop them back into the landowners or the ranchers' property. And they were telling us, there's a lady up in Taos that does a lot of investigation on this. Her name is Greenwood. And she's done a lot of investigation, and she's convinced, because I went to one of her meetings, and she told us that it was the space aliens. I told her that I wanted to speak at that conference, and she wouldn't let me because I was going to tell them that it was the Los Alamos laboratory folks that were doing this experiment.
Sir, will you please conclude your remarks?
Pardon?
Will you please conclude your remarks?
Okay. Like I said, those 2 investigators were fired by Pete Domenici and Gary Johnson, who was our ex-governor. These 2 officers were expelled from their job after they confiscated all their reports and computers and all. Then they were let go from their jobs. So just to let you know that we had our senators, our congressmen, and our governors involved in this drastic disaster. I have a friend of mine, Lee Cordova, who was a retired, he's a retired game warden. He lost 16 cows to this.
Sir, your time's up.
And then there's another friend that lost 2 out of his 3 that pretty much left him without any income. But I stand to be corrected. If the Los Alamos can come up and show me videos of a spaceship picking up a dead cow, taking it to Blanco, Colorado, and bringing it back. If the Los Alamos can show me that, I stand to be corrected, and I will apologize. But right now,
Sir, we need to move on to the next
we got to end
speaker.
this deal that the space aliens are doing it. It's not the space aliens. Thank you.
Thank you. Violet Albee. And then we have Carol Ripito Zamora and Alan Singlar.
Thank you for your panel, and I urge you to come back. I think this discussion is only starting. I lived downwind from Los Alamos when the Cerro Grande fire happened. We had, I live in Old Sarco, which is on a high road.
Excuse me, the court reporter's having trouble hearing you. Can you lower the microphone?
What I want to say, I lived downwind from Los Alamos, and I experienced the downwind specifically after the Cerro Grande fire. And my neighborhood was showered by bark. And a lot of the discussion tonight was about fire, but nobody talked about how fire makes its own weather. And I know that a lot around Los Alamos has burned, but spark fly. When one of your panelists mentioned the extension cord and how the venting could just go off. Unfortunately, it's just, like you said, there's a kind of culture that doesn't seem to realize that they have the life of so many people around them at stake. Now, I asked many times, there were many meetings after the Cerro Grande fire because people were really concerned, with good reason. 10 years later, where are the vital statistics? Just like Mr. Tafoya, I'm very concerned. At the time, I had two young daughters. They were 13 and 14. Something people should know, the risk for a female to be damaged by radiation is 20 times, especially when they are adolescent, the risk of man, and then all those things. But I think that you should reconsider the safety of WIPP, of Los Alamos, and maybe it's time to, why maim the very people you're trying to protect? If you can solve that riddle, I'll go with your program, but till then, I won't. And I will please try to see if you can clean up and shut down a place with right on the middle of beautiful sacred land on the side of the volcán. When you give us a map, why don't you give us the 300 fault? What about the wind velocity that happened in Los Alamos in the summer when it's a thunderstorm? That roof over those things could just blow up. Now, I would love to come back 6 months from now and see if those concerns have been addressed, let alone a mobile lab that could go around so that if there is, like it happened at the Cerro Grande fire, some emission, we could find out where they are and try to stay away from the place. As you know, nuke, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it. Please help us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you want to submit your map for the record, for the hearing record?
Absolutely.
If you'll bring it up to the court reporter's table, please. Next we have Ms. Carol Ripito Zamora.
Hi, welcome. Thank you, guys. I just wanted to say that first and foremost, we have to remember that the land before Los Alamos and everyone that got there was and hopefully still is sacred. And two, we have to protect that and yes, ourselves. But more than anything, I want to remind you guys that you guys and all of us here, we're all sparks of Father God on an adventure as all of us. And in that light, I ask you guys to remember that. I ask you guys and all of you people here to surround all the people that have ever been at Los Alamos, that are there now, especially the workers, with the white light, capital L, the light of God, the light of Christ, your prayers, and to ask for wisdom and knowledge for all you guys. And basically, that's pretty much it. That way we can get past this, because we are all accountable, not only to each other and to the children and the future, but to Father God. And, well, I'm from Cimarron, and I have Gift of God Healing Center and Art Studio. And as I do copper, silver, tin, lead. So for me, it's interesting to study all the various elements, and some of them truly are dangerous. And because of that, well, I'm asking you guys to ask for the wisdom and knowledge, and for Father God to help and guide you to get to the bottom for the best way possible for all of us, not only as Americans, but for the rest of the world. Because whoever said we don't need World War III, IV, and 99, because there won't be anything, because the severity and the strength of these weapons. So on that level, well, please remember what I said, and remember to ask for wisdom and knowledge in your jobs, and to surround all the people at Los Alamos, wherever they are, with the light and the truth of God. And on that way, you can do and be your best, and not, well, get the royal kick when we do face the Creator. And as I said, He created all of us, and we need to remember that. And I'm from Taos and Cimarron too, so I understand where He's coming from. And all I can say is God bless you and all of you. And all of you guys, remember to surround all of these people with the light. That way, well, we can all use our minds and make it better, stronger for all of us. God bless you guys.
Thank you. Ellen Sindler, and then we'll go to Mr. Scott Kovac.
My name is Alan Sindelar. I come as a private citizen and longtime resident. When I learned about the drum at WIPP exploding, I looked into it sufficiently to find out that it was 2 letters in an instructional directive. It was the word organic that was somehow turned to the word inorganic. Spell check won't catch that. I offer that we are playing with something that is beyond our ability to contain. We are working with materials that exist only to destroy. With all of the advanced degrees, with all of the tremendous wealth of the city on the hill, we are operating above our level of intelligence, understanding, and wisdom as humans. We should not be playing with these materials in the way that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Scott Kovac.
Good evening. My name is Scott Kovac with Nuclear Watch New Mexico. Thank you, members of the board. Welcome to Santa Fe. We're getting a little glimpse of how dangerous these materials really are. There's very smart people, very hardworking people, yet it still gets away from us. There was talk about waste minimization. I have an idea. Don't make pits you don't need. It's my understanding that the solid waste boxes are not tested for internal thermal event. That is, a fire that starts inside of them. So I would request you kind of check into that. I have the latest safety basis report for Los Alamos National Laboratory. There's 15 facilities. Each of these safety basis reports is due to be updated annually. The average of all these are 3 to 4 years old. This is an ongoing problem at the laboratory. We need to try to address that. Thank you. The 60 drums are getting a lot of attention, and it's about 20 cubic meters or so, and it's the part of the 400 cubic meters, kind of the end of the 3706 campaign, which was 3,706 cubic meters of transuranic waste to go to WIPP. The half-life of plutonium-239 is 24,000 years. The corrective measures evaluation for Area G at Los Alamos gives us some estimates of the waste buried there. The true estimated in Los Alamos, Area G, is 41,000 cubic meters. Also, the low-level radioactive waste in Area G, 645,000 cubic meters. This is all planned to be left behind. The true waste at WIPP is buried 2,100 feet underground. WIPP has a performance assessment of 10,000 years. The estimated 41,000 cubic meters of true at Lannel is only buried less than 65 feet deep, and yet it only has a performance assessment of 1,000 years. DOE should perform a 10,000-year assessment on all true waste buried at Los Alamos. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next we have Mr. Jay Coughlin, and after that, John Talks and Susan Gordon. Mr. Coughlin.
I'm Jay Coughlin with Nuclear Watch New Mexico. I want to start by stating my appreciation for the board over all these years. You've been at it since the late 1980s. You've done really good work. I appreciate it. The somewhat neoconservative elements with Congress try to cut you year after year, but I appreciate your ability to keep on going and provide the important information that you do. I'm going to try to cram in 4 recommendations in 3 minutes, and I may not get to them all. I have with me 2 documents that were released this last month, and one of them is the preliminary notice of violation by the NNSA headquarters. And then the other one is a DOE Inspector General report on how Los Alamos lab addresses issues. And then from the notice of violation, it becomes very clear that essentially Los Alamos lab does not follow DOE orders. And I can't profess to have, intimate knowledge of DOE orders, but in general, I think they're pretty good. And what I'm suggesting is a root problem is I'm going to call it Lannel exceptionalism, that it thinks it's an entity unto itself, that it can tweak DOE orders to serve its own ends. And if you go line by line through this notice of violation, you see in detail how Los Alamos apparently intentionally strayed from DOE orders. And these are clear violations of orders, if not legal provisions under New Mexico state law as well. And then I cited the DOE Inspector General report, which is kind of congruent with the notice of violation. It basically comes to the conclusion that in half of the cases, roughly 200 cases, which were deemed to be, quote, serious issues, the laboratory was incapable of identifying, let alone addressing, root causes. And I want to suggest again that a root cause that led to the closure of WIPP was Lannel exceptionalism, where the lab thinks that it can tweak DOE orders, and it erupted a barrel that led to the closure of the multi-billion-dollar waste isolation pilot plant. So my first recommendation is make Los Alamos lab stick to and follow DOE orders. Now, a second recommendation is y'all have done some very good work on whistleblower protection, specifically at Hanford, and you need to look at that across the complex. I sat here listening to some bland anecdote given by Director McMillan, how he solved some staff person's problems over comfort level. Well, that was a little endearing anecdote to hear, but it doesn't satisfy my concerns over whistleblower protection. I personally know 3 federally protected whistleblowers and know of many others. Los Alamos has a long, long history of whistleblower retaliation.
Sir,
and
will you
I
please
ask the
conclude?
board to, go further in protecting whistleblowers. So yeah, you're going to tell me I ran out of time. It's always this ridiculous situation in which there's a lot of empty talk, and we're limited to 3 minutes. That's pretty sad. I'll submit written comments to follow up with. But again, my appreciation to the board. Keep at it. You're very invaluable.
Do you want to submit your 2 documents for the record, sir?
They're impromptu and not yet in written form, so
okay.
I will.
Thank you. Mr. Talks?
I'm John Tokes. I am an environmental engineer and a resident of Los Alamos. Lived there for the last 18 years. I've been involved in radioactive waste for the last 25 years or so. I guess I'm dating myself there. And full disclosure, I count as among my clients Department of Energy and Los Alamos National Lab in the past. And I will say that of all the DOE sites and other facilities around the country, nobody lives more intimately with their radioactive waste than we do in Los Alamos. There are places in town where you can throw a rock across a chain link fence and hit a rad waste site. Recently, a big one was cleaned up, which is wonderful. I live about a quarter mile from that one. I just want to thank DNFSB for being here and for its work in holding Department of Energy's feet to the fire. I think sometimes that's really necessary to make things happen. And I really appreciate the focus you've given that and given this particular issue, which I find is just an appalling mistake that led to this colossal expense and difficulty for all the complex. I really believe in radioactive waste management and effective radioactive waste management. We have to do something with it. WIPP is a great solution. It was a shame to see it put in that position. And also I came here with the hope that I would get some more warm, fuzzy feelings, that I would gain confidence in what's happening south of Los Alamos across the canyon. And yet I have to admit that I am leaving with less confidence than I came in with. So I really am, as someone who is right there, nearest receptors, as opposed to folks in Santa Fe and Taos and even Jemez, that we're really counting on folks like DNFSB to improve the situation. Thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Susan Gordon, and then Mr. George Anastas.
Good evening. I want to start by thanking the board for your work. I think it's been essential over the years, and we really appreciate you doing your job and, let us know how we can keep you funded and going forward. I want to make 3 points. One is I want to remind us that before the National Nuclear Security Administration was created, the Environmental Management Program, all of the cleanup was handled separately and not under NNSA. And so I think it's a good thing that that program, cleanup, is being separated back out. We always felt that moving cleanup under the weapons program would mean that it wouldn't happen, that the competition for money would go to weapons and not to cleanup. So I am glad that that separation is happening again, and I look forward to more cleanup. I wanted to thank Mr. Santos in particular for bringing up the issues around the corrective actions that have come out of the Accident Investigation Board. I believe that there were nearly 600 corrective actions, and maybe it was at WIPP, and another about 200 that were at Los Alamos. That's a lot of corrective actions. you know, and it would be interesting to see that list of corrective actions and what steps have been taken to address those concerns. That's a lot. I mean, you know, if they made one corrective action, one a day, it would take years to get it all done. So that's a lot of work, and I think we need to keep monitoring what's going on. The last thing is that the New Mexico Environment Department does have a key role in this. And their job is to protect the state, to protect us as community members, to protect our air, the environment, the water in particular. And so their job, part of their role is to levy fines against Los Alamos and Department of Energy for those failures identified in these 600 plus corrective actions. But instead of actually making the Department of Energy accountable for their actions, for their mistakes, the Environment Secretary, Ryan Flynn, negotiated a settlement with LANL. Now, that negotiated settlement allows LANL and DOE to move forward with their wish list of projects that they wanted to do anyway. So instead of paying a fine and hurting out of their pocket, they get to do their wish list, which includes building roads to improve access for more waste coming into New Mexico around Carlsbad and for continuing to make nuclear weapons at Los Alamos. So I don't know what the role of the board is in terms of, you know, accountability and working with the state to make sure that there's some accountability towards LANL and Department of Energy, but I think that that is really lacking, and they're getting away with murder. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Anastas.
Good evening and welcome to Santa Fe. Thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate the opportunity of presenting several comments to you about tonight's discussions, but I will follow up with a written response. And my comments relate to training. At your April meeting last year down at Carlsbad, I gave the board a report on drum detonations in the DOE complex, and the report was up to about 1990. And I really am asking the board to see if somehow that report can be updated with drum detonations in the DOE complex, as well as international events which have occurred in the UK and in Russia and in France, so that DOE and its contractors can learn from some of these other events that have taken place. Additionally, I did recommend at the April meeting that perhaps for the training for the waste operators, there be a written proficiency examination so that there is some record of the waste handlers actually mastering the procedures and protocols that they should follow. And when they see orange and red smoke come from a drum, what they should do, and perhaps go beyond their supervisor to a specialist. The last item is that with rigorous training and examinations at LANL and buy-in by LANL management, I think that will assist in the improvement of the safety culture at the laboratory. And again, I will follow up with a written discussion of these points as well as several other points. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the list of public speakers that I have. Was there any other member in attendance that signed up but didn't make it onto my list? No. Okay. Then I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for your comments, and I remind you that the public record is open for 30 days. So those of you who made comments and want to submit something for the record, or those of you who didn't make comments but still would like to submit something for the record, you have the ability to do so until April 22nd of this year. I would also note there were some handouts from the Department of Energy that were at the back table, and I know that we didn't have enough of those handouts to go around. So we will post those handouts on our website, www.dnfsb.gov. So I would direct you there if you are looking for any more information. And again, information about this hearing and information about the complex in general are located there. So did you have a question, ma'am?
Is it in the purview of this board to look into the suicide rate of young people at Los Alamos? Because the work there is very influential, and those records were not available because I looked into them about 10 years ago and couldn't find anything. And there's a public health nurse here in New Mexico who reports that level is quite high. And at one point, someone who was a former resident, a former employee of Lanel, took me to Los Alamos and took me to a friend's house. And she said, and he confirmed, that he had 4 children who committed suicide.
I'm sorry, that's outside of the scope of our purview, but I appreciate your comment. So at this point, I'd like to turn to my fellow board members to see if they have any closing comments for the record. Mr. Sullivan?
No, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Santos?
No, Madam Chair.
Mr. Hamilton?
No comments, Madam Chairman.
So I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our witnesses and their organizations for supporting this hearing. I also want to thank all of those who attended, either in person or via the internet, as well as the elected officials, other representatives of state and local organizations, and congressional staff members who were able to join us this evening. Our goal for this evening was to gather information on potential hazards to the public and workers posed by the storage and processing of transuranic waste at the Los Alamos National Labs and the Department of Energy's plans to address these hazards. Tonight we heard testimony from the National Nuclear Security Administration, Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program, and the laboratory leadership team, as well as comments from the public. The board will consider the information gathered this evening to inform any actions we may take regarding these issues in the future. Once again, I thank everyone for their participation in this hearing. The records for the proceedings will remain open until April 22nd, 2016. This concludes the public hearing of the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board. We are now adjourned and off the record. Thank you for attending.